House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics. Today we're continuing on the study with regards to the questions of conflict of interest in lobbying in relation to pandemic spending. Today, the hearings will be webcast and will be available on the House of Commons website. Today, we have an unusual situation where we had a meeting scheduled by the expectation of the House or the order of the House, but instead of the witnesses that we had planned, we have Mr. Rodriguez, the Honorable Pablo Rodriguez joining us.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order,
Mr. Polyev, on a point of order.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that Mr. Rodriguez is not coming instead of the witnesses that were requested, but in addition to them. And we welcome him to be here. Whenever a government House leader says he wants to testify to an ethics committee to unburden himself and of some things, that we obviously would welcome that as parliamentarians, but obviously that doesn't replace the motion to have either the Prime Minister or his staff.
Yeah, and I will be taking direction, of course, from the committee, but of course we are taking direction as well from the House of Commons, which of course had that extensive list of requirements. And so you are correct that today does not replace anything that was expected by the order from the House. I've got a little bit of a speaking list here
now.
Point
of order, yes.
I have Mr. Barrett, then Mr. Angus, then Mr. Fortin, and then Ms. Shanahan. So we'll go to Mr. Barrett next.
Well, thank you, Chair and colleagues. You know, as you said, Chair, this is unusual, and there is some precedent for this situation, and I would like to address that. And the parliamentary law clerk, Mr. Walsh, had said at committee hearings in 2010 that, quote, the Prime Minister and any minister has no authority to prevent someone from appearing in front of a committee. Their ministerial function may present a limitation on what you can ask that political aid when they're in front of you, but everyone has a duty, apart from members of Parliament, senators, and the Governor General, to show up when summoned before a committee. And end quote. I think that context is very important for the situation that we're faced with here today, and do expect that the committee at a later time should discuss instructions to have the parliamentary law clerk called to speak to this issue. We were to meet today by order of the House, a majority of members in the House, the will of Canadians being expressed with respect to the appearance of witnesses and the production of documents. Now, that order gave the government an option. That option was to have the witnesses that the committee requires, and that discussion had been initiated at committee and then was continued in the House on Thursday. Those witnesses being Mr. Rick Tice, Mr. Amit Pal Singh, and Mr. Ben Chin at this committee, as well as the production by the PCO of the committed due diligence report, and as well as an order with respect to the National Defense Committee and a witness appearing there. Now, the government House leader did say in the House and subsequently outside of the House that the government would instruct individuals who were asked or ordered to appear not to appear. Now, the motion passed by a majority of members in the House and representing the will of Canadians to have those folks appear did provide an option to the government, and that was to have one person appear in place of those witnesses, and that is Prime Minister Trudeau. So those were the options that the government had. And now we're in a situation where we have public statements from the government spokesperson, the government House leader, that they will defy an order of the House. And this is preventing Canadians from getting answers. This is preventing committee from doing its work, and it is clearly a violation.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order, Chair. Your mute is on, Chair.
Pardon me. Do apologize, Mr. Dong. I'm recognizing your point of order.
Thank you, Chair. I mean no disrespect to Mr. Barrett, but are we in debate or are we actually still doing the point of orders? Because I was listening to your instruction as what we are going to proceed. I think some of the issue that he raised could be addressed by the minister in his answer. That's
okay. So the question is, or the point of order is where we are at this point in time. Colleagues, obviously we have a witness that volunteered that is not has not been instructed for us as a committee to hear from him, and committee members have not called this member. And so really, I guess at this point, I think that effectively the House leader has made a motion that he he has volunteered to be here. Now I need to hear if in fact there is the committee will to hear from Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez was not invited by this committee. He was not instructed by the House of Commons to be here. And so I guess it is my duty as a chair to recognize if or not there is a will of the committee to hear from this witness who has not been asked to be here.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Chair.
Mr. Dong.
I thought that there was a notice given to Mr. Rodriguez to appear. So isn't that
no? You are incorrect. He volunteered to be here. Yeah. We had a second point of order, Ms. Shanahan.
Yes, indeed, there was an amended notice of today's meeting that was sent out.
You are correct.
That indicated that Mr. Rodriguez is here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ms. Shanahan, I did put a notice out saying that he would be here. But I did not have the committee's agreement to do that, and so I arbitrarily did that. It is now my requirement to. I am the servant of the committee, and so if committee decides that they don't want to hear from somebody who they have not asked to be here, and the House hasn't instructed us to listen to, it is my duty to abide by the desire of the committee members. Now, going back to the speaking list, I'll return to Mr. Barrett. It would be nice for us to come to a decision because we only do have 3 hours in this meeting. Mr. Barrett.
Well, I guess I would just say, Chair, that you're absolutely right. This witness was not invited, but has requested to be here. And we have a member of the Queen's Privy Council, the government House leader, who wants to be here. We have white space this afternoon in our calendar because the witness that was ordered by the House has failed to appear. And so let's hear what the government House leader is prepared to or able to offer in answer to our questions. But we will have to review this matter with the law clerk and then look at next steps.
Mr. Angus, we'll turn to you.
Thank you. Well, I had put my name down to speak on a point of order, hoping that I could get ahead of this debate so we could get another piece of business finalized. But I will put that on the table at this time and then speak to this issue as well. I had wanted to raise the issue of the letters that we've been receiving from Victor Lee's lawyers, and just to make sure that we have a clear path going forward. I was very surprised to find out that Victor Lee's lawyers was responding to the committee through Twitter as opposed to through the committee. There's a process. I've never seen that before. I was very surprised by some of the claims in the letters, and I want to say I'm very hopeful that Mr. Lee's health is good, and this is not about putting undue stress, but this committee agreed to issue a summons if Mr. Lee did not answer. The fact that he says he's asserting his rights under the Canada Evidence Act about responding to us, I find very surprising. Is he concerned about a criminal investigation that we're not aware of? That the letter from the lawyer stated that the questions that he failed to answer were follow-up questions. That is incorrect. These were the fundamental questions we had asked, and we'd asked questions regarding the corporate structure, which after 8 months, I think we're all in agreement. None of us have a clue of the corporate structure, of the immense real estate holdings, of the side hustles, the private companies, the for-profit companies, the shell companies that the We Group have. And Mr. Lee can give us that information. His lawyer stated that the question that we had asked about giving us a list of where the schools were built would take months. I find that to be a ridiculous assertion. If you're a charity and you're in the business of building children's schools, that list should be fairly straightforward. In fact, I see that we advertise that they have this special donor accountability tracking mechanism, so you can track your donors' pledges. So that should be an answer that's easy to be given. And I was surprised in the last letter saying that there was no one else that they were aware of who could maybe find this information at we. Are we to understand as a committee that an organization that has property and assets worth millions of dollars has had a man off sick for 8 months, and there is nobody in that organization who has the capacity to find any of the answers that a parliamentary committee has been willing to actually issue a summons if necessary? So I'm asking you, Chair, I think it's fair that we ask for a doctor's letter at the very least. We've given extra time. They've said that they couldn't meet the deadline. We said that's fine, but I think we need to take this with seriousness. If someone has medical conditions and they're posting on Twitter about their medical conditions, then I'm very respectful of that. But I also think we should get a doctor's certificate. So I'd like to ask my colleagues if they could at least agree that we need to get this done and answered. So I put that as question number one. In terms of the issue before us today, I'm a big fan of Mr. Rodriguez. We go back a long ways. I don't know what he has to offer this committee. I'm willing to hear from him because it's a matter of respect. But I also urge my colleagues, the time is ticking before legislation comes to our committee. We have to finish this report. I want to get this report finished. It is a priority for me, and it is a priority to get the Pornhub study finished because people around the world are expecting us to do this. So I'm urging my colleagues to do this right. And maybe a solution is to get a briefing from the law clerk. Maybe that's a way that we can get out of this without breaking down into filibuster. I'd urge my colleagues, let's hear from Mr. Rodriguez. Let's decide whether it is pertinent to our study and then decide what to do about the fact that the 3 witnesses that were asked for by Parliament have not shown up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Angus, and I'll take that as notice that you're going to move a motion with regards to the requirement of medical proof with regards to Mr. Lee's condition.
Can I just do that now? How would you want me to do that?
Point of order. It's on a point of order.
Mr.
Madame Shanahan.
Ms. Shanahan. I think we're maybe settled there. Mr. Angus, I will take that as notice, and if you want to provide that in writing to the clerk, that would be helpful as well. Okay, we will now move to Monsieur Fortin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair, I think something serious is happening here today. I understand that the government house leader decided that he wanted to appear before the committee. I agree with you, Chair, that the committee should have an interest in hearing him. Chair, excuse me, a point of order. I'm not hearing Mr. Fortin very loudly.
I'm wondering if we can do another test of your sound there, Monsieur Fortin.
Oui, alors,
Yes, so everything seems okay on my end.
Mike, just a little bit closer to your mouth.
Comme ça?
Is this okay? Can you hear me better now? 1, 2, 3. Hello. It's a beautiful day outside. Can you hear me?
It seems to me that everyone can hear it other than Madame Shanahan. Maybe there's technical issues on Madame Shanahan's end. You may want to look into that. Monsieur Fortin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. So I was saying that we're in a fairly unprecedented situation here. I'm not sure what the goal of our meeting is here. The goal was to hear from a certain witness, and we haven't heard from them. Now we have the government house leader who's saying, well, I have things to say concerning the study, concerning the WE scandal charity, so I think we should hear from him. And I hope that that's also what my other committee members want to hear. But, Mr. Chair, we're in a really different situation here. Last Thursday, there was a debate in the House that lasted just about the whole day. And the goal was to find out whether it made sense to welcome Mr. Barrett's motion to compel certain witnesses to appear. It was amended, it was debated, it was passed on last Thursday. And that motion ordered Mr. Rick Tice to be here as a witness before the committee today at 2 p.m. And he's not here. The motion also stated that the Prime Minister could, if he wanted, appear in place of Mr. Tice. And I can see that the Prime Minister is not there, unless he's hiding somewhere. I don't see him. So, Chair, I think what we need to do first, before we decide on anything concerning Mr. Rodriguez, I think that I'm going to table a motion calling on the committee to take note of the absence of the witness who had been summoned. Point of order? You can't table a motion.
Madame Shanahan, I haven't recognized you yet, but I do understand that you have a point of order, Madame Shanahan.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Chair. You can't table a motion during a point of order.
I think you were on the point of order, Madame Shanahan. Currently, we are having a debate with regards to if we're going to hear this witness or not, because that hasn't been approved by the committee members. And so I will go back to Monsieur Fortin. I thank you, Madame Shanahan, for all your assistance. But if you just text me with your suggestions, that may be more constructive. Monsieur Fortin.
Oui, alors...
Yes. So, Chair, I'm not on a point of order here. I'm just saying, we're opening the debate. And this witness was summoned for 2 p.m. In fact, the House ordered the committee to have the witness come at 2 p.m. And that's Rick Theis. And we were summoned pursuant to orders of the House. We can see that Mr. Tice is not here and the Prime Minister is not here. So what I would move is that the committee immediately report to the House to advise the House that the witness who had been ordered to appear is not present, nor is the Prime Minister, and that the House should do the appropriate follow-up, take any necessary appropriate measures to sanction that absence or to follow up as appropriate. That's what I would like to move.
Okay, that is a motion, and because it is with regards to the business that we're in debate with regards to, we'll move to I guess a debate on that if anybody wants to intervene with regards to that, and then we'll move to a vote. If it is now debate on the motion, so we will work through the list I have now in front of me. If members had intended to speak about something else and not this, please let me know, but we'll turn to Ms. Shanahan, Madame Shanahan.
Mr. Chair, my hand was up from the beginning on the point of order, the original point of order that Mr. Polyev had brought up, making a statement which you had agreed with without discussing it with the rest of us concerning the appearance of Mr. Rodriguez today. And that being that we must respect the parliamentary institution, and part of that parliamentary institution is ministerial responsibility and accountability. And what we have before us is a minister who is going to answer. So in respect to the motion, to the order from the House, it is this minister who is going to answer the questions that we have, because this is in accordance to the principle of ministerial responsibility. Staffers are not elected. Staffers are not on the ballot. It is ministers that respond on behalf of the government. And so I want to hear from Mr. Rodriguez. But before we do so, I would like to address the, I don't know what it was, point of order or intervention by Mr. Angus regarding Mr. Lee. I am shocked. And yet maybe I shouldn't be, because this is not the first time that this has happened here in this meeting, where aspersions are cast on a Canadian who is going about his business, who has been drawn into something that this committee is dealing with,
Point of order.
who is trying to.
Pardon me,
I'm sorry, I am speaking now.
Point of order. No,
order.
point of order.
Order. I will just begin by. I'll go to the point of order, Mr. Angus, shortly. But right now we are debating Mr. Fortin's motion. I think that the initial intervention spoke to that. In terms of Mr. Lee, with regards to Mr. Lee, that motion is not currently up for debate. There was the motion. There was notice that motion would be coming forward, but because that doesn't relate to the business at hand, which is if or not we will hear from Mr. Rodriguez and the witnesses at this meeting. I don't find that is in order to have that debate at this time. This is not a business meeting. This is a meeting with regards to one specific issue, and that's the witnesses that we'll hear from today. So, Ms. Shanahan, if you want to return to the debate with regards to that, that'd be fine. But we are discussing the motion of Mr. Fortin's motion.
I will.
Pardon me, Mr. Angus. Point of order.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Angus,
Sorry.
did you have a point of order?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I just think that this sort of coming. I'm raising questions about. Getting questions and answers. I'm doing this in seriousness. If Ms. Shanahan wants to fight and personally attack all members of the opposition, that may be her business. I don't think it's that wise, but on Mr. Fortin's motion, whether or not I agree with it, I'm willing to follow the rules, and I think you just made a wise ruling. We are focused on Mr. Fortin's ruling motion, and we get to debate that.
That's not a point of order. Ms. Shanahan, will turn back to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I will fight on behalf of Canadians any day of the week. You can count on that. But I agree that the motion that is in front of us now concerns the appearance of Mr. Rodriguez here in front of this committee in good faith, and he is on the amended notice of meeting. He is in front of this committee. He is expecting to speak to this committee, and by that same normal and usual practice of this committee and of other committees in the House, that we are flexible when it comes to witnesses, and we certainly want to hear from the witnesses that can be of the most use to the study that we have at hand. In fact, when we talk about responsible government, we know that many on both sides of this House have spoken on the principle of Canada's form of responsible government, and that is that ministerial staff have no authority to make decisions on behalf of ministers. They report, and I believe this is Mr. Poilievre had something to say on this matter, as did the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, that they have no authority to make decisions on behalf of ministers. They report to and are accountable to ministers. Ministers are accountable for their actions to Parliament. This is not a new concept, and this is from the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, as stated in a document, Accountable Government, a Guide for Ministers. And so this is the principle that we're hearing, and we've spoken about this before, Chair, that this is a committee that from its earliest days has evolved and has learned how to work around and with these very difficult issues that we have before us. And in so doing, I agree that this was an important principle when it was brought forward by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and it is a key principle today. In fact, it is a fundamental principle that we should be responsible to. So I take exception to the first remark made by Mr. Poilievre, saying in some way that Mr. Rodriguez's appearance here today was just that he happened to be passing by, and so he's here, but this has nothing to do with the matter before us. It has everything to do with the matter before us, and I am, for one, am looking forward to hearing Mr. Rodriguez speak and to be able to ask questions to him. And that is what I have to say on this motion. As far as the motion goes itself, I would like to have it reread, but I am against the motion insofar as it It casts aspersions upon the appearance of Mr. Rodriguez here today. It is done in good faith and in full adherence to the principle of ministerial accountability, and indeed respects the wishes of the House.
Okay,
but
colleagues,
I would like to have it read out again. Thank you.
We will have that, the motion. I wonder if that has been provided to the clerk yet in writing. Do we have a written form of that? No. Monsieur Fortin, I'm wondering if you could provide that to the clerk in writing so that could be distributed. We'll continue on this debate until such time. We are now about half hour into a 3-hour meeting, and so we have used a significant amount of time, but we will try to get that circulated in written form. Mr. Fergus.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, juste pour vous confirmer.
Yes, Chair, I just wanted to confirm you probably already received it, and if not, I did ask to have it sent to you.
We suspend while we're waiting for it to come
wonderful.
to us.
We'll turn to Mr. Fergus now. We are now half an hour into a 3-hour meeting. I do want to continue to get to the decision as to if or not we'll hear our witness. And of course, if our witness does get to answer questions, he probably would like to do that sooner than later. Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, first of all, I think you opened the door to a discussion concerning Mr. Lee, but I'm going to limit myself to what we're dealing with here, which is the motion before us, or the official motion that will be before us once Mr. Fortin delivers it in writing. So the question I want to ask comes back to the issue of accountability. And this is really such an important issue for us, for all members of this committee. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Monsieur Fortin.
I simply wanted to say that the debate that Mr. Fergus is bringing here is a debate that was already had last Thursday. You may have good arguments or bad arguments concerning summoning Mr. Tice, but that debate is over. It ended last Thursday when we passed a motion. Today, there's a very simple issue. The witnesses are not here, and I'm suggesting that we advise the House that the witnesses did not obey the order to appear. The House can decide what will happen after that, but I don't want to redo the debate over whether or not Mr. Rodriguez should be appearing in place of the witnesses. That's not what we're supposed to be debating. What we're supposed to be doing is to hear from Rick Tice. He's not here. So let's, I think we should hear from Mr. Rodriguez, but...
Okay, I think because I get a sense that this debate can carry on for some time, I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and simply ask committee members, does anybody oppose to hearing from Mr. Rodriguez at this meeting?
No, je m'excuse, Monsieur le Président.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but...
Is that correct, Mr. Fergus?
Monsieur le Président.
No, Chair. I was in the middle of giving my perspective on the motion, which was before us by Mr. Fortin.
Excusez-moi, Monsieur.
It's not being debated right now.
Sorry, Chair.
I'm taking the chair's prerogative. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm going to ask again, is anybody opposed to hearing from Mr. Rodriguez at this point?
Monsieur le Président, est-ce que je peux...
Chair, can I just ask a very simple question?
Are you objecting to hearing from the House?
Mr. Fergus opposes. Does anybody else oppose to hearing from Mr. Rodriguez at this point? Could you please raise your hand?
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair.
Being that there is support to hear from Mr. Rodriguez, we'll turn to Mr. Rodriguez for your opening statement, Mr. Rodriguez.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, point of order. Point of order.
Mr. Fergus.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, you said that there was a motion before us, and you said that we weren't able to ask questions during points of order. So I said, okay, I have things to say about Mr. Fortin's motion, and I don't understand why you're not letting me at least express myself.
Colleagues, we have a decision to make. What I have a sense of is that this is going to be a debate that will extend for some time. The question or the motion had nothing to do with if or not we would hear from Mr. Rodriguez today. It had everything to do with if or not we would report back to the House the absence of the witnesses that the House had instructed us to hear from today. And so the question that I have to committee members, out of respect for Mr. Rodriguez and the fact that he has only now 2.5 hours left in his appearance here, that we would allow him to speak and that we would get back to the motion at hand following his testimony here. I think that I'm getting a sense from members that that's the way they'd like to proceed. Mr. Fergus, I understand that you would not like to proceed that way, but
point of order, Chair, we want to know if there's a motion on the floor or not. Can the clerk
There's not a motion on the floor.
us?
There's not a motion on the floor.
No,
there's not.
We want to hear.
Order, colleagues. Order, colleagues. Order, colleagues.
Let the chair speak.
There is a motion that has been brought forward. I am asking if there's a will of the committee to hear from Mr. Rodriguez, to allow him to provide the testimony of members to ask and get answers to the questions. Is there a willingness to do that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Chair, only if Mr. Fortin retracts his motion.
Sorry, Chair,
colleagues, we'll suspend for a moment here. Colleagues, will suspend for just a moment.
The other matters later on. There's no reason why we can't look at Mr. Fortin's motion tomorrow or after 5 p.m. today or some other time. And at all other matters regarded to Mr. Lee, Dr. Lee or Mr. Lee, that can all be done later. As I understand, we're not debating any of those things. We're now moving to Mr. Rodriguez. It seems strangely liberals don't want to hear from him after insisting that he be here. So what I would suggest is that we simply go to Mr. Rodriguez, let him have his opening statement, and we begin. And if there are any motions that need to be withdrawn quickly so that they can be reintroduced later on, and so as not to keep our witness waiting any longer, then we do that. But let's get down to business. We obviously have a bunch of liberals here who have something to hide, or else they wouldn't be trying to shut down the debate.
Point of order, Chair. Mr. Fergus has the floor.
Committee.
Colleagues, order.
Every time you show up,
colleagues,
comments.
Colleagues, order.
Point of order. You can learn some
colleagues,
point of order.
Order.
This is too much.
Order.
You were here. He asked a question.
Madam Clerk, can you mute all mics
schedules
other than mine? Madam
Mute the mics.
Clerk, yes, thank you.
Mute the mics.
Colleagues, order. I believe that there was I'm not sure that Mr. Poilievre ever got to asking for UC, unanimous consent, to adjourn debate on the motion that was being debated. But
I don't even know which motion that is, Chair. I'm so lost. There's just so many.
Mr. Dong, order. Colleagues,
Mr. Chair, point of order from myself.
Mr. Sobera.
To all my colleagues, obviously, we are gathered this afternoon to speak and to hear from the witness that we have in front of us, Mr. Rodriguez, our Honorable House Leader on our side. I would like to hear from Mr. Rodriguez. I think it behooves us all to raise our hands, to speak when the chair recognizes us, when it's poor, and when there's a point of order to be made by the honorable members. Let's make our point of orders. Let's get that across, but I think we can all do it in a very professional and mature manner. And Mr. Chair, I turn it back over to you. That was my intervention. I think we need to move forward in a very professional manner. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Mr. Chair, if I may.
Chris, your mic is mute.
Pardon me. Mr. Sobera, in an effort to be helpful, I'm wondering if you could do me one further favor, which is to ask for unanimous consent to adjourn debate with regards to the motion that was currently under debate, and move to hear from Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Sabera,
Chair, I thank you for asking me that. I am one member of the committee. If it is the will of the committee, then the will of the committee will proceed so. If it is not the will of the committee, then the will of the committee will not proceed so. Again, I ask for decorum from all members so we can have a productive meeting here with the witness that was provided, incorporating the fact of ministerial responsibility. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, colleagues, Monsieur Fortin.
Chair, yes, just to close this debate, I don't want to have a filibuster endlessly every day for no reason. So I'm ready to accept Mr. Poilievre's proposal that the motion I brought forward, and I think you should have received it by now, that motion be debated after we've heard from Mr. Rodriguez, who is here with us today. But I'm not withdrawing the motion. I'm saying we can debate it later. But I agree with hearing from Mr. Rodriguez first.
Okay, I think there's unanimous consent to proceed in that manner. Does anybody oppose that?
Chair,
seeing
point of
nobody,
order.
Point of order, Madame Shanahan.
Yeah, I want to understand what we are doing. Are we? You're asking for our consent for Monsieur Fortin to withdraw his motion?
Yes, the debate on the motion, the motion will be withdrawn at this point, so that Mr. Rodriguez can speak, and Mr. Fortin reserves the right to reintroduce that motion at a later
point of order, Chair.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Colleagues,
j'ai pas dit que je la retirais, là. Je veux juste.
I just want to be clear. I'm not withdrawing the motion. I would suspend debate on my motion to give us time to hear from Mr. Rodriguez. I'm not withdrawing it.
Monsieur le Président.
And Mr. Chair?
Colleagues, I need to suspend for 1 minute. There's a technical question with regards to what we need to do with regards to the motion. One moment. Monsieur Fortin is correct that all we are doing is withdrawing. We're ending debate with regards to his motion now. He is free to reintroduce that at a later point, either at this meeting or at a future meeting. Is there any opposition to suspending debate with regards to? Just allow me to get this out before we have a debate with regards to it. We will have. Is anybody opposed to having the debate suspended and allow Mr. Rodriguez to speak? We'll have our questions, and Monsieur Fortin will be free to reintroduce that motion at some point in the later meeting or at a meeting in the future.
I would like to,
Mr. Fergus.
Thank you. Just to be very clear, when I was speaking before on the motion, which is now being suspended, you said there was no motion in place. That's fine, but Mr. Workington, please.
Pardon me.
Out of respect. Please, I would appreciate you at least acknowledge that I was speaking appropriately, patiently, with my hand up, to talk to the motion that Mr. Fortin had presented, which is now being suspended.
No, I do apologize if I misspoke there. There was a motion that we were debating. It was not the debate as to if or not Mr. Rodriguez would speak or not. It was with regards to reporting back to the House the appearance or the lack of the appearance of the witness that was expected by the House. That was what was being debated. Mr. Rodriguez, we'll turn to you now for your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good to see you. It's been a while. Content de vous voir chacun d'entre.
Happy to see each and every one of you. For some of you, it's been a long time since I've seen you.
We go back a long time. I had black hair when we met a while ago. Colleagues, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I'm here because on our side of the House, we have a deep respect for the traditions of Parliament. And one of those traditions is the principle of ministerial responsibility. And as I said during my speech in the House last week, we believe that ministers of the cabinet are accountable to the House of Commons for the decisions of the government and also for the actions of their own political staff, So, c'est pour ça que...
And that's why, since we took office in 2015, our government has repeatedly shown respect for this tradition in the House of Commons and also in committees. And every day, our ministers answer questions in question period. Every day. Currently, they've responded to thousands of questions in daily QP and committee. Our ministers have made countless appearances and answered many questions. And that's all normal. That's how things should work. We've always been collaborative with members of parliament, and we've always been accountable. It's our responsibility, and I think that we have fulfilled that responsibility. We've done so professionally, and we've been pleased to do it as well, Mr. Chair. So ministers have a collective responsibility for the actions of those throughout government. And so I'm here because as a member of cabinet, I speak on behalf of the government and on behalf of those who work in it as well.
Some of the members on this committee would rather be hearing from a staff member in the Prime Minister's office, Mr. Rick Theis. But as I told the House last week, and I want to make it clear again, we fundamentally disagree with the decision of the opposition to use its powers to intimidate and mistreat staff members who work in political offices. And this is in direct contradiction to the very bedrock of our parliamentary system. Unelected political staff members are accountable to members of cabinet, and cabinet is accountable to parliament. So this is a clear principle that the official opposition believed in more than a decade ago, when it was in power as a government under a conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I was there. Some of you were there. Mr. Poilievre was there. Charlie was there. Others too. And as I noted last week, it was the conservative House Leader, Jay Hill, who spoke extensively in the House about why the Harper government was refusing to allow its staff member to testify at the committee. And Mr. Hill said at the time, and he was quite right, when ministers choose to appear before committees to account for their administration, they are the best source of accountability and they must be heard. Public servants and ministerial staff support the responsibility of the ministers. They do not supplant it. They cannot supplant it. End of quote. And so the Harper government instructed its staff not to appear. Instead, cabinet ministers went in their place. Malheureusement, les conservateurs.
Unfortunately, the Conservatives, under their new leader, have changed their minds on the importance of this fundamental principle of ministerial responsibility. What was so important to them when they were in government has been thrown out the window now that they're in opposition, and I think that's regrettable. And it's dangerous, Mr. Chair, because Canadians need to know that they can trust that the very traditions of Parliament will not be abandoned simply out of political expediency by those seeking power. Mr. Chair, the argument put forward by the Conservative House Leader in 2010 was correct. It was the right thing to do then, and it's the right thing to do now.
Briefly about the matter at hand, regards to the decisions on which charity, our government has turned over 5,000 pages of documents to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. We did this in August of last year regarding Mr. Tice. As the documents show, he had one interaction with We Charity, a phone call. That's it. In fact, this was disclosed by the Prime Minister's office itself. So this should come as no surprise to anyone many months later. And according to Mr. Tice, the call lasted for about 25 minutes. We Charity raised their ongoing work with diversity, inclusion, and youth on the Canada Student Summer Grant, as well as a proposal for social entrepreneurship. Mr. Tice asked we how their proposal on summer grants would ensure diversity of placements. And for their part, the Keilburgers expressed concern that this type of program would need to get off the ground soon. At that discussion, during that communication, there were no point of where expenses were discussed. Also, at no point there were any commitment, assurances, or advice given by Mr. Tice to we on any subject other than to contact the officials involved at Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth. Alors, Monsieur le Président, tout ça.
So, Mr. Chair, this all occurred in May 2020. This is a normal thing for Mr. Tice to do as a member of the policy staff and the PMO. He spoke to a stakeholder organization, and this was one of many conversations he had with a variety of organizations. It was a general discussion, and he directed we to officials at Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth, which was the most appropriate place to get answers for the questions that they were asking. And so the staff member was just doing his job in a professional way. There's nothing more complicated about it than that. These were actions that were similar to those of thousands of people who work hard every day in government, in the public service, and in ministers' offices. And I hope that you'll come to understand this as you proceed with your work. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. Today, in an effort to maintain order, because we have had some difficulty in doing that even in the beginning of this meeting, I will be looking to match giving Mr. Rodriguez the opportunity to answer the questions that he has been asked. And so we'll provide him with equal amount of time to answer the question as he is provided to the duration of the length of the question, which should be matched by the provision of time for the answer. And in so doing, that will also do it in the reverse. So we'll turn to Mr. Barrett to begin.
Minister, thank you for joining us today. Have you talked to Ben Chin about his role in shaping the CSSG? Yes or no?
No.
Have you talked to Rick Theis about his role in the CSSG? Yes or no?
Well, I did speak with Mr. Theis to make sure that I could answer all
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Ms. Shanahan.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair, but the motion before us, the order before us is regarding the activities of Mr. Tice and no other person. And so we should remain in the context of the motion before us.
I think it's a point of debate.
Interference.
We'll turn back to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett.
Has Rick Tice been contacted by the RCMP about his role in the CSSG?
Not that I know of.
When was the last time that you spoke to Mr. Tice?
Yesterday. I called him just to make sure that we have all the answers because I'm here as a minister responsible and I'm here to answer for Mr. Tice.
Has he been contacted by an officer of Parliament about his role in the CSSG?
About a what? Not that I know of, no.
Has Ben Chin been contacted by the RCMP about his role in shaping the CSSG?
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Chair. Discuss Mr. Tice.
Point of order. Point of order. Mr. Sobera?
Yes, yes, it's Mr. Sobera. Thank you,
yeah,
Chair.
Pardon me.
And Chair, thank you for your work today, because I know the circumstances are extenuating. I do wish to challenge that my honourable colleague, Mr. Barrett, is going down asking questions regarding Mr. Chin.
That's not a point of order.
We're here to speak to.
I'm trying to hear the point of order. Mr. Sobera, I'll allow you to get to the point of order.
Today's discussion is surrounding Mr. Tice. Honorable Minister Rodriguez is here answering the questions about that individual, not about any other individual.
The motion before the House, or the study before the House, is about is considerably broader than that, and so we will not be here to limit the minister with regards to testimony he may be able to provide with regards to the investigation with regards to pandemic spending, lobbying, and the remainder of the study. We'll turn back to Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, the question to the minister was if Ben Chin had been contacted by the RCMP about his role in shaping the Canada Student Service Grant.
Listen, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I came here to answer questions about Mr. Tice, so I don't know about Mr. Chin. I didn't speak to Mr. Chin.
Well, we've heard a lot about ministerial accountability from the minister, but he's refusing to answer questions from a parliamentary committee when he asked to appear. My next question, has Ben Chin been contacted by an officer of Parliament about his role in shaping the Canada Student Service Grant?
I'm here to answer based on your motion in Parliament regarding Mr. Rick Tice. That was clear. And I'm here to be ready to be here 3 hours.
Point out, Monsieur.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, it is. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair,
Today's order was to hear from Rick Tice to answer our questions. Rick Tice is not here, and that's a motion that's suspended, but we'll be dealing with later. So we agreed to hear from the minister, but we agreed because we expect him to answer questions on the whole file. We don't want to hear him say, oh, well, we can only ask such and such a question about Rick Tice. Mr. Rodriguez wants to appear before the committee on our study about the We Charity scandal. So great. So we should hear him on that whole issue. He can't limit the questions that we would have asked Mr. Tice. This is Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Fortin. I think for the benefit of all committee members, including the minister, we will now read pursuant to the order of reference of March 25th on the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, November the 16th, 2020. The committee is resuming its study on the conflicts of interest and lobbying in relation to pandemic spending. And so that is the notice of motion, the notice of meeting. And so we will expect that the minister will be able to provide answers with regards to the scope of that particular study. Mr. Barrett, we'll turn back to you.
Has anyone in the Prime Minister's office been contacted by the RCMP with respect to their involvement in the Canada Student Service Grant?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did you, Minister, have a role in shaping the Canada Student Service Grant?
No.
Did you speak with anyone in the Prime Minister's office in advance of this meeting in order to provide this committee with information?
With Mr. Rick Tice, yes, and I have to correct something because I did have a further question. I called him today, a short conversation.
How many times did PMO staff interact with either Craig or Marc Keilburger with respect to the Canada Student Service Grant?
I mean, those questions were asked. And
I'm asking you today, Minister.
There's so many witnesses. Prime Minister appeared, his chief of staff appeared, the clerk, and many others.
How many times,
appeared.
Minister?
I mean, so you can check the files.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. We'll turn now to Ms. Latanzio.
Chair, no. That is not that. I have 3 minutes remaining.
Merci,
Chair.
Pardon me.
Monsieur le Président. Donc, est-ce que j'ai mes 6?
Do I have 6 minutes, Mr. Chair? Can I start with my questions? Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Minutes will confirm.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order, Chair.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Barrett.
No, Chair. Point of order.
Ms. Latanzio.
Chair, I have 3 minutes remaining on my time.
Monsieur le Président, merci bien.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
I have 3 minutes remaining on my time, Chair.
Colleagues, order.
Chair, I'd ask you to speak with the clerk. I have 3 minutes remaining on my time. I withstood multiple interruptions by members of this committee. I have 3 minutes remaining on my time.
Mr. Barrett, order. Mr. Barrett, order. I will confirm with the chair. Pardon me. I've confirmed, yes, in fact, you do have additional time. We'll turn back to Mr. Barrett. I apologize, Mr. Barrett.
Minister, I'm asking you the question about the number of interactions between staff at the Prime Minister's office and Mr. Craig and Mr. Marc Keilburger. What is the number of interactions, sir?
But je pense.
Well, I think that these questions were asked previously and quite often throughout the process, so you can consult the answers that were previously given.
Well, I appreciate you haven't been at committee in a while, Minister, but that's not how this works. You're required to answer the questions that are being asked of you. Who did Rick Tice communicate with in the Prime Minister's office after his contact with the Keilburgers?
Moi, ce que je sais.
Well, what I know
is that Mr. Tice had that conversation of 25 minutes with where they explained about their services, this and that, and he referred them to diversity, inclusion, and youth. That was his interaction.
Who did he speak with in the Prime Minister's office after?
That's it.
Who did he report that conversation to?
He was not involved. I know where you're trying to get, and I'm sorry, but
to the truth.
Inventing thing or inferring thing, I always tell the truth. Inferring thing, but the thing is that he was not involved. He had that phone conversation, and then that's it.
And he never spoke of it to anyone in his reporting structure again.
I don't know why we're having 3 hours meeting on a 25-minute conversation. By the way,
Minister, The question is, who did Mr. Tice speak to in his reporting structure following his conversation with the Keilburgers? Who?
Nobody that I know of. I don't know.
Well, it would be helpful if Mr. Tice was here to answer that question. As the minister responsible, you should know the question. Who did he speak to?
As you know, ministerial responsibility is extremely important. That's why I'm here.
You're the responsible minister that's unable to answer the questions. Did Rick Tice authorize the WE organization to start spending on the Canada Student Service Grant on the 5th of May?
No, that I know of, no.
Was the Canada Student Service Grant authorized retroactively to May 5th?
No.
On May 5th, Sophia Marquez spoke with Rick Tice. Did Mr. Tice give the WE organization, any permission, authorization, or indication about the approval of the program?
No.
Who was on the call between the WE organization and the government on that date?
You mean when Mr. Tice
Yes.
was on the call? I believe it was Mr. Tice, and from what I understand, Craig and Marc Keilburger and Sophia Marquez.
And who told the WE organization that they were allowed to incur expenses as of that date?
Sorry, who told?
Who told the WE organization that they were allowed to incur expenses as of May 5th?
I can't answer that question.
You couldn't answer a lot of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Now we will turn to Ms. Latanzio. I do apologize again, Mr. Barrett, for intervening early. Ms. Latanzio.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Minister, for being with us today. First off, I just wanted to thank you for having talked about the accountability of ministers. I think it's really important for everyone to understand that ministerial responsibility. My colleague, Mr. Fortin, had been dealing with that issue and, wondering how we can get answers if the witnesses who are supposed to be here today are not present. But I understand from your speech and also from the tradition of the House that it is ministers who can appear before committees and provide those answers. So I want to thank you for that. So I'll go directly to my questions. Concerning Mr. Tice, did he have a role to play in negotiating the agreement for the contribution to UNI? And if it wasn't him, who did? Well, thank you very much for the question, and nice to see you, Ms. Latanzio. As I said, Mr. Tice had one interaction with WE. It was a 25-minute phone call with Ms. Marquez and the Keilburgers. It was a very general conversation where, they talked about their program and so forth. And Mr. Tice referred them to diversity, youth, and inclusion. So at no point was he involved in those negotiations. It was the public servants who would normally be taking care of that type of negotiation. Minister, I also want to talk about one date in particular, May 8th, 2020. This is a date that came up a number of times during testimony from other witnesses in other committees. So what concerns were raised about the proposed agreement between the summer grant program and the WE charity on May 8th? Well, the question was why that organization had been recommended, why there weren't other organizations, why it couldn't be done within existing government organizations, whether the organization in question was capable of delivering the services uniformly, would they be able to do it in both official languages? So a series of questions of that nature. We also learned that also on May 8th, the summer student grant program had been withdrawn from cabinet. Why was that? Well, once again, it's because there were questions. This is the first time that had been submitted. And, the Prime Minister wanted to know why it was this organization that was being suggested, why it couldn't be done internally. So at that point, there were a series of questions for which there were not sufficient answers. And at that point, it was withdrawn. Did Rick Tice discuss with we representatives? And if so, when and about what? So he had one conversation with we representatives. And that was on May 5th. It was a 25-minute conversation. It was requested by we representatives. They were the ones who contacted him. They talk a little bit about who they were, what services they offered, and so on. And once again, Mr. Tice did what needed to be done, which was to direct them to the people responsible for taking care of that. So in this case, diversity, inclusion, and youth. When was Mr. Tice made aware of the involvement of We Charity? If I remember correctly, I think it was around late April, early May, when they were preparing for a discussion in the COVID cabinet committee about it. And Minister, have you ever met, or did you ever have a meeting with we representatives? Did Mr. Tice have meetings with we representatives in a more personal way, as far as you know? No, he didn't have any meetings with them. I did ask him this question specifically. And he didn't have any meetings with we. So there was no other communication between them after May 5th with that conversation that I already described. And with you, Minister? No, I don't know them. All right, another question. We sent a social entrepreneurship contract in April 2020. Were you aware of that at that time in April 2020? So personally, I was not aware of anything like that. And Mr. Tice?
We're going to turn now to Mr. Fortin for his 6-minute round. Monsieur Fortin.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, could you tell us why Mr. Tice is not here today? Well, this comes back to the principle of ministerial responsibility, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Who gave the instruction to Mr. Tice not to appear before the committee today? I clearly said the other day in the House that staff who would be instructed to appear would not appear before committees and that they would be replaced by a minister. So if I understand correctly, as far as you know, Mr. Tice is not present today because he was told not to be present. Is that correct? Yes. Well, through the directive that I gave the other day, it was clear for Mr. Tice and for others as well that they would not be appearing before the committee and that they would be replaced by ministers, as often happens in our system, as the Conservative government did previously, and that was the correct thing to do. And so I'm here to speak on his behalf. Can you tell me where you get the authority to take precedence or to even contravene an order of the House? Well, I'm here because of the principle of ministerial responsibility, Mr. Fortin. Now, I know you, I know the work that you do on these issues, and I know you're very familiar with the concept. But my question to you, Minister, is what is the article or section of procedure or law that says that your decision takes precedence over the order that was adopted in the House last Thursday? you're saying that you told Mr. Tice not to be here and you're here. I mean, that's nice, but I want to know, where does the authority come from? Why do you get precedence over the order of the House? Well, once again, Mr. Fortin, this comes back to the principle of ministerial responsibility. It's a tradition that is longstanding. You know, often we function on conventions, and these conventions are necessary to ensure that our institutions work properly. Okay, so if I understand correctly, there's a convention suggesting that you, as a minister, you can take precedence over any order of the House. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm suggesting, Mr. Fortin, is that there is this important tradition, this convention, which is essential to our way of doing things in Parliament. I'm not familiar with this convention, Minister. I've never heard about this. No, maybe I'm naive, but I thought that the highest entity in the land was the House of Commons, and that you couldn't disobey its orders without serious sanctions. Now you're saying there's this tradition that ministers can contravene orders that are adopted in the House. Is that the same tradition that allowed you to order citizens to disobey the orders of the House? Is that the same convention? Now, this is a very specific point, Mr. Fortin. These are not just general conventions. It is a convention that ministers can replace staff members. Mr. Poilievre defended that principle tooth and nail when Mr. Baird appeared before committee in place of a staff member. The Conservatives did that in all committees. This is back in 2010. Well, I wasn't there in 2010, you know, but we had this debate last Thursday, March 25th, and what I know is that on March 25th, you know, just 4 or 5 days ago, the House ordered Rick Tice to be here. And today, I see you, Mr. Minister, saying, well, no, we don't obey that order. I'm going to be here instead. Well, that's fine, but I'm trying to figure out what is the rationale for this? Where is the legal principle? I don't think that you can do this in all circumstances. Can you tell me what are the specific circumstances where a minister can decide that he's going to disobey an order of the House? Okay, now don't twist my words here. Well, you're laughing, Minister, but I think this is serious. No, it is very serious. You know I respect you, Mr. Fortin. I respect you too, Minister. But I want to know why you think you have precedence over the order of the House. No, just let me answer. What we're saying is that there is this principle of ministerial responsibility, and because of that principle, a minister can replace a staff member who is not accountable to Parliament, but is accountable to ministers, and ministers are accountable to Parliament. Okay, but the House didn't call for a minister to come. They called for Mr. Tice. I didn't see anything in the resolution saying that Mr. Rodriguez or any minister could replace him. And I've never seen anywhere in any rule or tradition that a minister could order someone to disobey an order of Parliament. I've never seen that before, and it seems like a serious violation, Minister. I'm sorry to say it, but it seems like a very, very serious action. It's really unprecedented. May I answer? Yes. If you look at page 30 of the Book of Procedures in the House of Commons, you can see that there is this tradition and that the principle of ministerial responsibility allows ministers to be accountable not only for their actions, but for the actions of their subordinates. So that's very clear. Well, I'm willing to agree on that, but...
Mon temps est expiré, vous dites?
Is my time up, Mr. Chair? Is that what you're saying?
Time is up, Mr.
Okay.
Fortin. We're going to turn to Mr. Angus. Mr. Angus, we'll turn to you for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. And yes, we have many traditions and conventions in Parliament. Usually it's about protecting the Prime Minister no matter what, doing what's got to be done to, make sure that you can beat scandals down. So I was around, and my hair is as gray as yours, so you and I go back a long way. Maybe some of your other colleagues don't remember the old days, but I remember Stephen Harper, and I remember, was it was it May 2010, when this committee called Sebastian Togneri, a minister staffer, to this committee to testify. I remember my good friend Wayne Easter said he smelled a cover-up. Paul Szabo issued the order, and a minister staffer came. So obviously there's a precedent.
Yes, and then the minister replaced the staffer based on the principle of ministerial responsibility. And what Mr. At the beginning, but then the staffers were replaced, as you know, by different ministers, including Mr. Baird, I think Madam Finley, and others, and that was defended, of course, by Mr. Poilievre, who was there at the time.
Well, I'm now don't get me in with Mr. Poilievre, otherwise Madam Shanahan's going to shut me down and start attacking me. So I only have 6 minutes, so I don't want you to provoke anybody on your team. So
sorry, point of order, Chair.
Oh, there we go.
Point of order,
sorry.
Ms. Shanahan.
I would like Mr. Angus to withdraw that remark. That was very unparliamentary.
I didn't make a ruling with regards to parliamentary language, and I don't think that the language that was used is considered unparliamentary. We'll turn to Mr. Angus. Mr. Angus.
Thank you. I'm hoping Madame Shanahan's not going to take is doing this to interrupt my time, because I really want to talk with my old friend Pablo. We sat on a number of committees together, so I hope that's not coming out of my time. I think what's really fascinating here with Mr. Tice, and you know, I'm going to put my cards on the table. I want to get this study finished. We got to get this thing done. There's not much that I don't know now that I didn't know before because of the 5,000 pages of documents. But what I do know is that Mr. Tice is the Director of Cabinet Affairs. So when he meets with Marc and Craig Keilburger on May 5th, they're discussing the plan that's about to go to Cabinet. That's what they're discussing in that 25 minutes. So one of the things that Craig says afterwards, he writes to Rick Tice and he thanks him for the conversation about streamlining the contribution agreement. So what was streamlined in the agreement out of that conversation with Rick Tice, the Director of Cabinet Affairs?
I would say nothing. I spoke with Mr. Tice about this, and he clearly said that the conversation was very general, where we took the time to explain everything they were saying, and he directed them to diversity, inclusion, and
yeah, but you see, that doesn't make sense, right? Because this is like 3 days before this is going to Cabinet. This isn't something that's just, and you said earlier, well, they were talking to many groups, his job is to talk to many groups. There was only one group. This was the plan on the table. It was finalized on May 4th. They talked about it on May 5th. It was going to Cabinet on May 8th, and he said he helped streamline it. When we look at this report, this plan, we see lots of holes and lack of due diligence. So obviously, he did something in the streamlining because Rick Tice also said, hey, we'll loop back if I have anything additional on this document. Let's be in touch soon, regardless. So what did they streamline in that meeting before it went to Cabinet?
On that last email, I asked Mr. Tice, it was a question of courtesy. Let's connect, like you say that generally in a conversation, this and that. So that was not specific.
But in that document, and were you given a copy of that document? Because you're here as the minister in charge. The Keilburger document that says Government in Canada and we revised proposal. I want to help COVID-19 Youth Service Initiative. No. Did you have a copy of that?
No, I don't.
Okay, because what surprises me is in that document there's a photograph of the Prime Minister's wife and mother. And I find that really surprising that it's not just that the Keilburgers knew, everybody knew the Keilburgers know the Trudeaus, but this is being given to all the senior cabinet ministers. So did Rick Tice say to them, whoa, guys, don't put the picture of the Prime Minister's family in there because you're putting him in a conflict of interest? Did Rick Tice or anybody at cabinet say, this is really over the top to be that brazen using the Prime Minister's wife
point of order?
Oh, man.
Recognizing a point of order.
Yes, Rick Tice is not a member of Cabinet.
I'm
not sure that that's a point of order. Mr. Angus will return to you.
I was asking about the Director of Cabinet Affairs who's given a document where the Prime Minister's wife and mother are being used as the sales pitch. Didn't he say if this is going to go to Cabinet, this is inappropriate? Because Mr. Rodriguez, you've read the Conflict of Interest Act. It puts the Prime Minister in a very clear apparent conflict in Section 5, Section 6, Section 7, Section 8. So Mr. Tice's job is to protect the Prime Minister from getting into trouble. Did he say to Craig or Marc, hey, do not use the Prime Minister's family as a selling deal when we're talking about a deal between $500 million and $900 million? Did that happen in the conversation?
Well, Mr. Tice was not aware of the connections, or I don't know how you want to call it, between we and the family.
His mother?
And again,
but they're listed as they're celebrity ambassadors. They're listed, so that means that they work for the organization. So he wasn't aware.
Enter?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Charlie. In that conversation, and I did speak about this with Mr. Tice, because it was very important for me to be able to communicate to you what had been discussed. And again, there was nothing of that sort, and there was no discussion about money or whatever. And as you know,
I'm just wondering, because his job is to protect the Prime Minister, so I would have thought that he would have answered that. My time is running out. Can I ask you one more question?
Please.
Because you're not really here for the Canada Summer Service Grant because you weren't there, but you are the director of the House. When is C11 coming? Because I know it's going to upend all our work. So are you bringing it like in a day or 2 days? I mean, if your Liberal colleagues are going to filibuster, I'm kind of sort of trying to fit my calendar in how much I got to listen to them before we get to the legislation. So could you answer when we're going to get to C11?
That's a very good question. Normally I get that from your House leaders. I appreciate very much. We did call it on Friday, and I hope we're going to be able to call it back again soon.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We're going to turn to Mr. Polyev now for 6 minutes. Pardon me, for 5 minutes, Mr. Polyev.
Mr. Rodriguez, you said that Mr. Theis did not know about the Prime Minister's family relationship with we. Did he get this document from the Keilburger brothers in May? Yes or no?
I don't know.
Well, you talked to him. You're here to testify on his behalf. So yes or no, please.
I'm saying I don't know, Mr. Polyev.
Well, if you'd read even the publicly available correspondence, you would know that he did receive the package. And in that package, there is this promotional document, pictures of Sophie Gregoire and Margaret Trudeau. Those are the spouse and mother of Justin Trudeau. So did Mr. Theis know that the Prime Minister's, his boss's wife and mother were in a working relationship with the We Charity? Yes or no?
From what I understand, no.
So he didn't read the package they sent them?
I didn't ask him if he read the package, Mr. Polyev. So if I didn't know he had the package, I didn't know if he read it or not.
Well, you're here to answer on his behalf. So you're the person the government says has the answer. So answer.
But I did ask if he had knowledge of we, had met with we.
Right. That wasn't my question.
Me, whatever.
So my next question, Mr. Chair, is
he didn't.
My next question, Mr. Chair, is did he know that the Prime Minister's family had been paid by the We Air organization?
From what I know, no.
He did not know?
Understand? No.
So he was under the false assumption that the Prime Minister's mother and wife were doing their celebrity ambassadorial work for free.
Well, see, Mr. Chair.
Yes or no?
This is a type of attack we want to avoid.
Yes or no?
Our staffers.
Point of order, Chair.
He's implying stuff.
Point of order, Mr. Sabera. Mr. Sabera.
We are here to the minister is here to speak about Rick Tice. The honourable member from Carleton is repeatedly bringing up the Prime Minister's mother and the Prime Minister's family, and you all know my view on that from prior meetings.
That's not a problem.
And that's inappropriate, and not with regards to what we're debating today. The motion.
As I've made it clear that we are studying the lobbying with regards to pandemic spending. I do believe that it's within the order of the study. Mr. Polyev, will turn back to you.
So yes or no, did Mr. Theis know that his boss's mother and wife were paid by the We Charity? Yes or no?
Based on what I know, no. I already answered your question, Mr. Polyev.
So he got the document. It showed the family members in it. The We brothers sent him this, and he apparently did not know, even though it was right in this document.
Point of order,
so next point.
Point of order, Mr. Dong.
My understanding of the conduct in committee is the same as in the House, so no props can be used during the committee time. Is that true?
No,
Absolutely not.
that's not true.
That is
Please.
not true to my. I've seen many times where props have been used, including documents. We'll turn back to Mr. Polyev.
A moment ago, you said, and you were asked clearly, was the Canada Student Service grant retroactive to May 5th? You answered no. I have here the contribution agreement. This is the date on which it was signed, June the 23rd. It says here, effective date and duration. This agreement shall come into effect on May 5th, 2020. Were you simply ignorant of the facts, or were you deliberately misleading the committee when you said it wasn't made retroactive?
I never mislead committees, Mr. Polyev, and
So
those are things that are negotiated by public servants. I'm not aware.
It says right here.
Well, then that's what it is. Those are things that are
you said
negotiated.
it wasn't retroactive. You're saying it now was retroactive? Let's be clear.
I don't know.
You don't know. You don't seem to know very much about this, yet you're the minister responsible.
Well, I do.
Well, you're the minister responsible.
Well, ask questions on what you call the meeting for. And
you're the minister responsible.
May I speak?
Well, you said you don't know. So let's get on to the next point then about Mr. Theis.
Just a sec.
Next point. You said you don't know. That's your response.
Point of order, Chair.
Can I speak once in a while here?
Point of order. I did make it very clear that I did want the witness to have the opportunity to answer and use the same length of time that the question consumed, but I do recognize a point of order, Ms. Shanahan.
Well, it's on that point exactly that the witness, please allow the witness to respond to the question.
Thank you. That isn't a point of order, but I did make it clear to the member and the witness that was the case. Mr. Polyev.
Thank you. Did Mr. Theis tell public servants to get the program out the door?
Not that I know of. And regarding your previous question, I understand that they were asked at finance, and you have the answers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. I have here a summary of a phone call that Mr. Theis had with the public servants for whom your government has blamed this entire debacle. And according to the summary, it says here, Rick, critical path to get this out the door. So you're saying he did not say that he wanted to get it out the door. And here we have a summary of his phone call in which he says, and this is reading directly from the summary, critical path to get this out the door. Why would you testify that he hadn't told public servants to get this out the door when the call logs show he did?
As I mentioned to you, I spoke with Mr. Theis yesterday and again quickly today, and I asked those questions. I asked about his involvement, and I told you what it was, that 25-minute where it was more general than anything else. And I know that you are to point the finger at him and other staffers, but
okay. So yes or no, did he tell you when you spoke to him yesterday that he had told public servants to get this program out the door? Yes or no?
Can you repeat, please?
Did he tell you when you spoke to him yesterday that he had told public servants that he wanted a critical path to get this out the door? Did he really tell you that?
No, I don't think there was any reason for that.
No, he didn't tell you that. Okay.
There was no reason for him to say that.
You're testifying on his behalf here today, but you claim not to know anything about what he did, and so it's hard to understand what you're able to share with us.
That's false, Mr. Polyev. I'm telling you what we discussed.
You just failed to testify to tell me that to confirm whether or not he said we should get this out the door. And I'm telling you, it's right in the call logs that he said that. So you were ignorant of those facts, and yet you're supposed to be testifying on his behalf. So either you don't know,
Chair.
Or you're hiding things. Which is it?
Mr. Speaker, you've known me.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Ms. Shanahan.
The witness is here on behalf of the government. The witness cannot say what a particular person said.
Point of order, that's not a point of order. If you would like to be, if Ms. Shanahan, if you would like to be asked to be a witness, you're welcome to make that request. But we'll allow the witness to testify. Mr. Rodriguez, if you want to give an answer to that question, we'll allow you to answer that, and then we'll turn to Mr. Sobera.
Well, again, I mean, the questions that have been asked and raised by Mr. Poiliev were answered at the Finance Committee. He has the answers there, and I think that Mr. Poiliev is looking for information that he already has, and there's nothing new here.
Mr. Sobera, we'll turn to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and obviously nice to see my colleagues this afternoon, and welcome again, Minister, and to the committee. Minister, very first question, because I want to make sure we're very clear on the information in hand and clear on the facts that we're dealing with. Minister, did Mr. Tice have any role in negotiating the contribution agreement with we or any of its associated entities?
Absolutely not. As you know very well, and you know it well, I know how much you know your file, Mr. Sobera. We had many discussions on finance files. It's the public servants that do that. It's their job, and they do it very well. They're professional, and they done it. They did that.
Okay. In this case, who was responsible for negotiating the contribution agreement?
The public servants.
And the public servants being ESDC.
Yes.
Yes. And during our lengthy questioning with the Keilburgers, I think they've come to 2 committees, approximately 7 hours, probably even more than that if I've forgotten a day or two. Marc Keilburger, I'm going to read verbatim what he stated. The agreement technically began on May 5th. We were working in advance with ESDC, putting in resources to help develop the program. The turnaround time was so tight, and we were, of course, so passionate about helping young people at this time that we got to work right away with a full risk and understanding that if this agreement did not go forward, we would be at the financial risk of doing so. We accepted that risk because we really wanted to help. Is that, Minister, is that your understanding from that comment from Mr. Keilburger, just how the process was undertaken with regards to ESDC and its negotiations and vice versa, we with its negotiations with ESDC?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. My understanding is Mr. Tice had one 25-minute call with the Keilburgers. In that call, he listened. I met Mr. Tice 2 or 3 times. He's a very affable individual, very personable, very nice, actually follows up very quickly with all stakeholders, including myself, and just someone to that extent that will respond when he needs to respond when it's appropriate to do so. My understanding is that was the only interaction that Mr. Tice had with the Keilburgers. There were follow-up emails from the Keilburgers that Mr. Tice did not answer to. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. Based on my conversation and all the information that was provided to me, there was one 25-minute phone call, again, where it was mostly general conversation, and Mr. Tice directed them to diversity inclusion in the department.
Exactly. So my understanding, in the 5,000 pages of documents that were disclosed to the Finance Committee, and the members on that committee during that time, and I was one of them, and now on to ethics. Those was 5,000 documents. Mr. Tice had that 125-minute conversation with we, and then directed them to a minister's office for that program. That is correct?
Absolutely correct, yes.
Okay. Is Mr. Tice a minister?
No. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. At this current time, he is not a minister. He's an individual that works in the Prime Minister's office for the Prime Minister.
And on that note, and one of the reasons, if I may, can I, Mr. Sobera?
Please.
If on that note, the principle is extremely important. One of the reasons is to protect our staffers, and if you may, I'm going to quote someone here that says, minister staff who have appeared before committees have been denied the accompanying support of their ministers. They have been denied the opportunity to get basic treatments or of due process. They have been stripped of the ancient tradition that guarantees ministers are responsible for the function of their ministries and their department. And I'm quoting directly Mr. Poiliev here.
Absolutely. We know Mr. Poilievre is quite the eloquent speaker in the House of Commons and on committees, and those were his words just a few years ago. I do want to ask a question about Mr. Tice and his social relationship. I, in my time in this world that I've been blessed to walk on, I did not know about the We Charity. I didn't know about them until last summer. I do not know who Marc and Craig Keilburger are or were. Still don't really know them. So I have no social relationship with them. No any ties. Never been to a We event. Never been invited. I guess just not there. And frankly, not doesn't cause me to lose any sleep at night. Does Mr. Tice have any social relationship with either of the Keilburgers?
No, he never had a meeting with them, dinner, lunch, drinks, whatever. I did ask all those questions.
Okay. Does he consider them to be personal friends?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Rodriguez, have you ever had dinner with the Keilburgers? I know I certainly have not.
No. Actually, to be honest, when the first time I heard the name we, I thought it was we in French, O-U-I. I was wrong.
Yes, and then on that front there, just to respond, and I do want to put it on the record, that when I first understood or heard about this We Charity, I had to go ask local principals and teachers, in fact, what this organization was, and receive the pertinent feedback for me to make decisions on what I thought about this charity or did not think about this charity, or what I thought or did not think about this organization.
Thank you, Mr. Saberi. Your time is up. I'm not sure if that was a question, but Mr. Rodriguez, if you wanted to answer that question, if in fact you felt that there was a question there.
No, I'm just thank Mr. Saberi for his work. Thank you very much.
Very good. We're going to turn to Monsieur Fortin for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rodriguez, as far as you know, has Mr. Rick Tice already in the past refused to obey any order of the House or any order of a tribunal? Not as far as I know, Mr. Fortin, but in this case there was a directive. Do you know any other cases in the history of the House of Commons or the history of the conventions of the House, for example, any other cases where a minister ordered members of cabinet to disobey an order adopted in the House of Commons? Has that ever happened? Yes, a number of times. Could you name one, please? Minister Baird appeared before a committee. I believe it was in the place of Mr. Sudas. I can't remember exactly who it was. But did they order the witness not to obey an order that was adopted in the House? I'm talking about an order that was actually adopted in the House, summoning a witness to appear. I think that's got to be more rare. So do you know any other cases where a minister told someone, I forbid you from obeying this order from the House of Commons? Well, what I've seen is ministers telling their staff not to appear to a committee that summoned them and that they were then replaced. Well, sure, we've seen that before, I understand. Yes, and the minister goes in their place. Yes. But I'm not talking about invitations from a committee. There are hundreds of those every week. Well, maybe not hundreds, but a lot. But that doesn't have to do with ministerial responsibility. Yes, well, I mean, we could talk about ministerial responsibility for a long time. In fact, we did last Thursday. We spent a whole day debating it. That debate is now over. We could continue it ad nauseum, but the point is that it concluded in an order. The House of Commons, the highest organization of the land, ordered this instruction to appear. And now I've just learned that there are ministers who have more power than the House of Commons. So I'd like to know if there's any other case where any minister told someone, I command you to disobey this directive from the House of Commons. One example. I could refer back to 2010 again. The government House leader said that no staff member reporting to a minister could appear. Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
Time is up. We're going to turn to Mr. Angus. Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for appearing. I've always considered you a good friend. I don't feel that you're much of a witness to help us today, but I thank you for showing up. I want to just say that I have been committed to getting answers because this is our job at committee. And it is our job to ask tough questions. It is why the Ethics Committee has always been chaired by an opposition chair, because it is about holding government to account. And I've never seen a committee where government members are happy. They don't like asking tough questions. Occasionally we see them launch bitter personal attacks because we ask those questions. You know, today I asked a question about documents that we've been trying to get, and I was subjected to a personal attack by Ms. Shanahan. It worries me because I've had my family targeted for asking questions in this committee. I think we need to stay focused here. I think we need to stay focused on getting this committee report to Parliament. I don't think the government will like the report, but it is our job to get those answers. So I've appreciated having you here. I don't think it's added very much. I would like to ask my colleagues to stay focused on what this committee has to do in the time that's remaining.
Point of order, Chair.
These personal interruptions and interference.
Recognizing a point of order, Ms. Shanahan.
Well, given that my name has been used again by Mr. Angus, and he has in the past used the mention of his name to interrupt a member that was speaking, that these using the word attack, that is unparliamentary. It is in no way representative of the discussions that we're having here. And I would ask that the member withdraw his remarks.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is debate. That is not a point of order. Returning to Mr. Angus.
Well, so much for that, Mr. Speaker. I was actually trying to suggest to my colleagues that maybe we could stay focused and work together to get something done here, because we do have the Pornhub study, which I think is very, very serious. And I would like to see ministers come from that. But if we're going to have these continual interruptions and interference and go to the wall over stuff that at this point, I would like to get the report done. That's my feeling. I thank you for coming, Mr. Rodriguez. You may not like the report. Government may not like the report on Pornhub. They may. But it is our job to get it done, and regardless of the blocking and interference I've experienced over the last year at this committee with the endless filibusters and the interruptions, I will continue to do my job. That's what I do as a parliamentarian. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Angus. And I have to say that I always appreciated working with you. And you do have extremely tough questions, and that's your job. And it's fine. And my job is to try to answer them. Thank you.
Mr. Polyev, we'll turn to you now for the next round of questions. Mr. Polyev.
Yes, did Mr. Theis brief the Prime Minister on the Canada Student Service Grant to we? Yes or no?
Yes.
And did he tell the Prime Minister that the Employment and Social Development Department had produced evidence showing we could actually deliver the program? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes. I mean, the recommendation from the public service.
No, not the recommendation. Evidence that we could deliver the program.
Yes.
That's funny, because I have in my hands another document you've just contradicted. It's from Treasury Board. Finally, Treasury Board Secretariat notes that the Employment and Social Development has not provided evidence to suggest that We Charities possesses the capacity to undertake this work, especially under accelerated timelines. So did Mr. Theis lie to you and say that he briefed the Prime Minister that there was such evidence?
Well, after the May 8th briefing, they did the due diligence. And that's when the information was transmitted, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure what Mr. Polyev is trying to do here.
Well,
he's accusing Mr. Theis of doing something bad.
You claim that Mr. Theis told you that the department gave evidence that we could deliver the program. And I have here from your government's own Treasury Board Secretariat a report that was filed on the same day that said there was no evidence to suggest that we could even deliver this program. Well, did Mr. Theis tell you that, yes or no?
Mr. Polyev, the document was removed from Cabinet for due diligence. I mean, the Prime Minister had many questions. They were answered by the public servants, and the public servants, as you know, said that it was the only way to do it. That's it.
But I have for the public servants saying here they couldn't, that we actually couldn't or there was no evidence that we could deliver it. So it's the documents say exactly the opposite of what you're testifying.
Mr. Poilievre, the documents are a little bit small for me to be able to read on the screen. Sorry.
Right. Maybe you should have read them before you got here.
Well,
Boy Scouts rule. Boy Scouts rule. Come prepared. Come prepared.
5,000 pages, my friend.
Come prepared, my friend. If you're the minister responsible, own up and know what you're talking about. Now, did any public servants raise concerns about the integrity of the program?
No.
Well, I have here a document. Thank you. No, you answered the question.
But you did have those conversations and questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I have you said no public servant raised concerns about potential integrity. Well, here I quote from the Treasury Board Secretariat. Furthermore, the tracking of hours by a third party could be challenging and result in potential integrity concerns. Should students not be honest about hours accrued? So again, your testimony, you testify something, and I present to you in real time contradictions to what you say. So how is it that you're the minister responsible for this file and you can't answer the most basic questions accurately?
Well, Mr. Poilievre, maybe because you just want to hear some answers and you don't like some of the answers, and then you say that they're not good. But the answer don't depend if you like them or not. An answer is an answer, and you know me. You've known me for a long time. You know I always say.
Next question then. Did Rick Theis? Good. Let's get to it then. Did Rick Theis suggest that the We organization might need more funds? Did he tell public?
Point of order, recognizing the point of order.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to ask you how much time was for this round, because I have 3 minutes and 38 seconds on my clock.
Yes, and that's why I haven't called the time yet. It's a 5-minute round. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, sir, and I apologize to Mr. Poilievre for interrupting.
Mr. Poilievre, we'll turn back to you.
Mr. Theis is the Prime Minister's cabinet director. He spoke to public servants about this program. Did he suggest that we might need more funds than the public servants originally suggested? Yes or no?
No, not that I know of, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
thank you for that direct answer. I appreciate it. If I can
directly,
Mr. Poilievre, I think we're going to give Mr. Rodriguez the opportunity to answer. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. And it's important to mention, Mr. Chair, that the Finance Committee and the Ethics Committee have both heard directly from the non-partisan public servants who are responsible for this program, and no one raised flags about yes, it does. Yeah. No one raised flags about We Charities' finances and resources. No one.
Right. So I have here a call log. You've just said that Mr. Theis, top advisor to the Prime Minister, did not suggest there might be a need for more funds. In fact, on May 25th, in a call he had with senior officials at Finance and Employment, he said, and I quote here, potential for a second wave, but we'll need more funding to do that. So he's suggesting that the We organization might need more funding than the officials were originally recommending. Again, exactly the opposite of what you just testified. No. Why do you keep testifying the opposite of what the documents your own government has released say?
Mr. Poilievre, you're suggesting things that you think he's suggesting.
But we'll need more funding.
Mr. Poilievre, your time is up. Mr. Rodriguez will give you an opportunity to answer that question. Then we're going to turn to Mr. Dong for 5 minutes.
But again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Poilievre is suggesting that someone is suggesting something. I could be suggesting that Mr. Poilievre is suggesting that somebody is suggesting, and we go on and on and on. We need facts, and we don't get this from.
It's right in the documents.
Thank you, Mr. Dong. We'll turn to you now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've been listening carefully on the question and answer. And I must say that there not much new information coming forward. The fact of the matter is that we've been at this study since going back last year. And viewers should also understand that there is a parallel investigation by the Ethics Commissioner that's taking place right now, who, by the way, has, I think, in my opinion, has the most appropriate authority in looking into it, and I look forward to his findings and his recommendations. I always feel that this is what I've been told in the beginning of joining my colleagues in Ottawa. The committee work is nonpartisan in nature. But more and more, what I've been seeing is that it's getting really close or similar to what's taking place in House of Commons, during debates and during question period. And it's really, I would say, threatening the work and the outcome of this committee. I echo what Mr. Angus said earlier, that we have very important study that is being stalled by quite honestly, to conservatives. We all know what the schedule of the committee was going to be. We have the Pornhub study. We have also the anticipating Bill 11 coming forward, which was mentioned earlier, and also the finding or new information that we may be able to get through our conversation or correspondence with Mr. Lee. To me, that's the most productive part. That's the contributing part to this study that we're talking about today. So I don't know why the conservatives are just so addicted or believe it so much that they are going to gain maybe their positive political objectives through this process of endless questioning. But I think I haven't heard anything that I haven't heard, anything new that I haven't heard previously. But with that, I just, since we have the minister here on behalf of the government, I just want to clarify something. So first of all, is Mr. Sugar testified that no one in the public service raised any red flags about We Charity financial well-beings and resource being before the CSSG proposal went to cabinet on May 22nd. Did Mr. Theis see or hear about any red flags being raised about We Charity's finance and resource? I think it was touched upon previously, but the minister didn't get a proper chance to respond to that.
Thank you for your question. And as I was trying to answer, Mr. Sugar mentioned very clearly that there had been no red flag raised. And if I may, to go back to your initial comments, I agree that there's nothing new here. And I think that we're trying to create stuff or maybe invent stuff. I don't know what it is, but the Prime Minister testifying committee, the clerk many times, ministers, and there's nothing new coming out of this. And I think that your work, the committee does an extremely important work, especially in these times of COVID. I think we should concentrate on that more than anything else.
I can agree more. Those witnesses that we heard during the Pornhub study, I think we owe them, we owe them the report, and that report should come in timely fashion. In Mr. Sugar's testimony to the committee, the clerk of Privy Council said that given the importance of the issue to the pandemic response and the scale of the contribution, he did not see how the PM and the finance minister could not have been involved in the CSSG's policy, in the CSSG policy development and approval. Can you comment on that? This is with regard to the clerk of the Privy Council said that he just, given the importance and the urgent response needed in the discussion of the CSSG, he just couldn't see how PM and the Minister of Finance not getting involved in that discussion. What's your comment on that?
Well, from what I understand, because it was a major financial decision with lots of implication, huge programs involving important amounts of money. So that's what I understood from what Mr. Sugar said.
And is it common in your experience for unsolicited programs, ideas, or proposal to be sent to the government? And is there any improper in government considering and even acting on that those kind of proposal?
No, it's not uncommon. Actually, it happens all the time, especially in a period of COVID when you have to be creative, when you have to think outside of the box, when you have to create new programs, when you have to do things very quickly to help Canadians, and that's what we did. And so it's something common. Sometimes we get ideas and suggestions right from you guys, from MPs, from organizations, from groups, from unions, from businesses. It happens all the time, but it has to follow a due process.
Thank you. Your time is up, Mr. Dong. I'm going to now break for 4 minutes, members. I know that some members have been asking for a short break before we begin the third round, so we will suspend the meeting for approximately 4 minutes. Mr. Barrett for the next round of questions for a 5-minute round. To begin the third round of questions, Mr. Barrett.
Minister, what would have been the consequence of Mr. Theis obeying the House order?
Obeying the House order?
Yes, what would have been the consequence to him if he had obeyed the order of the House? Would he have been fired?
No, why are you asking that?
Because he was instructed not to appear, presumably by you, against an order of Canada's Parliament.
I explained to you very clearly, and you heard me in the House, the ministerial responsibility, right? Based on that, and as Mr. Poiliev was defending very hard in 2010, that's why I'm here.
Who did Mr. Theis refer we to at ESDC?
I don't know. It just referred to the department.
Did Mr. Theis speak to anyone at the We organization before or after May 5th, 2020?
No, not that I know of. No.
How much in expenses was we told that they could incur on the 5th of May?
Can you repeat? On the 5th of May?
How much in expenses was the We organization told that they could incur on the 5th of May?
Nothing. I don't know, but I think it's zero. But I'm sure that those questions were asked in different other committees.
Well, I'm asking you questions today, Minister. Marc Keilburger told the Finance Committee that he got to work right away. Quote, right away implies that he was tasked to get something done and that it was expected of him. So once again, who told Mr. Marc Keilburger that he needed to get to work in the absence of a signed contract from the government?
Okay, you know that it's not Mr. Theis, right? Because they said it many times. There's nothing was discussed about expenses.
Then who was it? Don't tell me who it wasn't. Tell me who it was.
That was very clear. But I'm sure it was reported in other committees, in other places. Mr. Barrett?
Minister, on what dates did Rick Theis communicate with the We organization?
May 5th.
And how many times did he communicate with Craig and Marc Keilburger?
Well, they communicated with him, by the way, that only time. They sent him emails, but he didn't respond, and he had, I don't know.
How many times did he communicate with Sophia Marquez?
I think you have all the documents, by the way.
How many times did he communicate with Sophia Marquez?
He had no further discussion with we, based on my conversation with Mr. Theis.
So you're saying he zero? He communicated with Sophia Marquez 0 times?
You mean if they had a phone conversation? They had one phone conversation.
Communicate, email, text message, social media, conversation in person, by telephone, fax, you name it. Communicate. How many times?
Maybe a few emails. I think a courtesy email, and you have all that in your documents.
Minister, I don't need you to. We're not here to find out what's in documents. We're here for you to answer questions from the committee. That's your obligation. You've claimed to be the minister in charge. You're the minister who knows very little. How many times did he communicate with Dalal al-Wahidi?
Mr. Barrett, if you want, I can take lots of time and go through the documents that you have.
Well, you should have done that before you appeared, Minister.
And give it to. I cannot guess your question, Mr. Barrett. I cannot guess your. Be respectful, please. So you have all the documents and all the same answers that has been provided to everyone.
Did the government vet the We organization for the Canada Student Service Grant?
What do you mean by vet?
Was there due diligence completed on this, on the awarding of this $500 million agreement to an organization that had paid members of the Prime Minister's family $500,000? Due diligence, Minister.
The the officials did. The official had those conversations. Had the
Officials in
meetings
which
with them,
department?
analyzed the departments, analyzed this, and then made that recommendation for the government to move along with.
And you don't know who conducted that process?
The name specifically, no, but I'm sure many people have worked on that.
Minister, who approved the incurring of expenses by the We organization?
I can get back to you on that one.
Okay, so Chair, the minister has undertaken to provide information with respect to who approved the incurring of expenses by the We organization. So I just want to ensure that that's recorded in your notes. That will be looking for the return of that undertaking by the minister.
But I can tell you it's not Rick, by the way, Mr. Barrett. I can tell you that.
Thank you. We're going to turn to Ms. Shanahan for the next round of questions. Ms. Shanahan.
Chair, I've ceded my place to Mr. Fergus.
Mr. Fergus, we'll turn to you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez, Minister, for being here today. I think it's so important to ensure that we know why we're here today. Today, March 29th, I'm looking at the motion that was adopted by the House of Commons. The motion says that concerning the study of the Standing Committee on Ethics in relation to the expenses of the pandemic, and then also Rick Tice, Director of Policy and Cabinet Affairs for the Prime Minister, be compelled to appear on Monday at 2 o'clock. So, Minister, you're here because of this motion in the House. Is that correct? Absolutely, Mr. Fergus. Point of order, Mr. Chair. This debate is closed. We already had this debate, and we agreed that Mr. Rodriguez was here to answer any question concerning the We Charity scandal, and not to just repeat what he thinks Mr. Tice said to a question that may have been asked to him. He's not here.
Point of debate rather than a point of order. Mr. Fergus, will have an opportunity to ask what questions he'd like answered, and we'll turn back now to Mr. Fergus. Mr. Fergus.
Merci, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I know that maybe Mr. Fortin doesn't think that I'm up to the task, but I am very much so, and I have some questions that I would like to be answered by our witness. So, concerning Mr. Tice's, the question of Mr. Tice here, you're here to answer for him because he was the one who was summoned to the committee, correct? Yes. Exactly. You're not here to respond to other questions concerning other people. Yes, you're correct. I'm here as a result of the motion that was debated and adopted in the House of Commons the other day, which asked staff who are not responsible to Parliament to come here and be asked all sorts of questions. I mean, you can see the tone of the room today, asked all sorts of questions, and we don't want staff to be treated like that. That's not appropriate. And that's why we decided that the Conservative government, that we decided, as the Conservative government did at the time, that we would use the principle of ministerial responsibility. Yes, and when you talk about the principle of ministerial responsibility, I remember that in 2010, Mr. Poliev had said that according to usage, staff does generally not appear before Parliament, and nobody contests that. So they designate someone to represent them, in this case, Minister Baird. And that was from May 2010. And it was also said that ministers are responsible to Parliament and accountable to them for policies, decisions, and the actions of the government. Cabinet and ministerial staff or rather ministers can appear on behalf of staff. Would you agree with that statement made by Mr. Poliev and also that long-standing tradition in Parliament? Absolutely. I think that Mr. Poliev at that time was entirely right. Perhaps he's not quite so right today, but at the time, I remember I was there. I had a little less gray hair at the time, but he defended the principle by which, staff would not appear, would not be summoned. And he said that that was a matter of consensus. He also said, quite eloquently, that ministers could appear before Parliament and before committees, and of course before Canadians too. And my final question, possibly my last question, I don't know how much time I have left, but I also want to say what Mr. Poliev said at the same time in 2010. He said that committees need to respect the tradition by which it is the responsibility of the ministers to answer those questions. You're entirely correct. And the official opposition at the time, the Liberal Party at the time, changed its position and agreed with the Conservative Party on the principle of ministerial responsibility, which is what we're applying now. Minister, this is probably my last question. Do you believe that political staffers should be intimidated or should be subject to political attacks for partisan ends rather than having those questions asked to the ministers? Absolutely not. I think we need to protect all of our employees from any party, whether they work for Mr. Angus's or Mr. Fortin or anyone else's party, or the party of Elizabeth May or the Conservatives. We need to know that these people are really working very hard for Canadians, and they shouldn't be allowed to be intimidated at all in committee. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Fergus.
Thank you. We're going to turn to Mr. Fortin. Monsieur Fortin for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Minister, no, you're saying that ministerial responsibility means that you are responsible for any mistakes that might be committed by staff who are your subordinates, but that doesn't prevent the committee from calling those people to testify to bring the facts to light. No, you said, I don't know. We need facts. Well, that's what we need. The only way to get the facts is by hearing from the people who were personally involved. And it's not about intimidating people, it's simply hearing from them. Now, I'm going to read a passage from the parliamentary procedure, which says that according to Section 18 of the Constitution Act 1867, Parliament has the right to proceed with investigations, to compel the appearance of witnesses, and to ensure that its good operation is ensured. This is essential to Parliament. So can you comment on that passage? What do you think about this? Does Parliament today have any less the right to compel witnesses than it had before? Well, I mean, the previous government functioned in exactly the same way, Mr. Fortin. Yes, but maybe you should inform the authors of Bosque and Gagnon here of parliamentary procedure in the 2017 edition, because they seem to be saying that since 1867, under Section 18 of the Constitution Act, Parliament has the right to compel witnesses. Maybe you should inform them that you don't agree. Well, I already gave you concrete examples of situations where the opposition at the time, so in the past, the Liberal Party in collaboration with the NDP and the Bloc, wanted to compel witnesses from the Conservative Party, and they wouldn't do it. Here you're talking about invitations to appear, but here I'm talking about an order. Parliament adopted a motion with a directive, an order. And Parliament deemed, rightly or wrongly, that they should compel witnesses. And you're saying that, and now these witnesses are not obeying the order. That seems contrary to parliamentary procedure to me. And it seems to me that this is a real violation. So I'm really shocked to read this, but I mean, if I've understood this correctly, you're violating parliamentary rules here. Are you not embarrassed? Well, going back to what happens in 2018. No, forget about 2010. I want to talk about 2021. No. I want to correct this here.
But we'll allow the minister to answer the question, Mr. Rodriguez, and then we'll turn to Mr. Angus.
Thank you very much, Chair. Et comme je disais,
as I was saying, yes, all of this is very important. The power to request documents, and at the same time, we need to respect that there is a nonpartisan public service.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for making time. You said before the meeting you talked with Mr. Tice. Before the meeting, did you talk with Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Fergus, Mr. Sorbera, Mr. Dong, Ms. Latanzio?
If I spoke to them?
Any of them?
No, sorry, no,
okay.
I didn't. No.
Okay. No, I was just wondering because obviously there's a concerted plan here to interrupt, to interfere. And, these people are not rude. I adore them. Whenever Mr. Fergus speaks, Mr. Sorbera and I were in Italy together. Mr. Dong and I were going to learn to sing together. Ms. Latanzia, I've just gotten to meet. Ms. Shanahan, good Irish Canadian. I've spent my life growing up with Irish Canadians. And yet whenever we go to talk, there's interference, there's disruptions. We went for, I think, 40 straight hours of filibuster meetings. So I'm wondering who coordinates that, because it doesn't seem natural. Would that be, because you're the House leader, would you have that obligation to sort of make sure that when difficult questions like the We Charity comes up, that they get their instructions to interrupt and to filibuster? Like, who would handle that?
No, Mr. Angus. I have a lot of things on my plate, but that's not.
But you don't do that. Okay, yeah.
No.
Because I was surprised because at the Canada-China meeting, they're doing the same tactics of interfering, getting angry, interrupting, and it doesn't seem like the Liberals I know. So I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be a plan here. So that's not the House Leader's office that would handle that?
No, Mr. Angus. Committees make their own decisions. I'm sure they have reasons, and you guys do an amazing job.
I know. Well, we made our own decision, and you guys overruled it. But like at Proc, you're filibustering Proc. You're filibustering foreign affairs on the COVAX vaccine. You're interrupting your people. Not you personally. You would never do that. I know. But your Liberal colleagues. So I'm thinking, what is it about the Liberals that make them feel that committees are such a threat? And again, I can't believe that Mr. Fergus and Ms. Shanahan just come here to pick fights. I mean, they have a job to do. It's a hard job. But, Canada, China, interruptions, points of order. It's a gong show there and it's a gong show here. So I'm just wondering, given this is a political issue that relates to the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's judgment. It costs you a finance minister. It has raised a lot of political scandals. So isn't there someone whose job it is to say, go in, guys, and make this day really difficult and shut it down? Because personally, I want to get things done. I want to get beyond this. I'm kind of done with this issue. I want to get this thing filed, but I can't because I try and reach out to your Liberal colleagues. And it's like, boy, it's the angry stone wall. So is there someone there you could talk to? And maybe get them to work with us. You're the guy. You're the negotiator, Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, and I spend more time.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Your time is up.
I was just getting started.
Talking to,
we'll let the minister answer. We'll let the minister answer.
Extremely
point of order, Chair.
Sorry, Minister. We have a point of order interruption here, Mr. Dong.
All due respect, I wait till Mr. Angus finished with his time. Didn't want to interrupt him. But I just want to point out to the committee that we are here today talking about this not because the Liberal member wanted to. Actually, it was a motion that we voted against.
I don't see any point.
I just felt that
that's not a point of order.
I've been targeted.
Sorry, Chair,
not a point of order
today. Can I ask on a point of order? Just
Mr. Angus.
Okay, the issue is that Mr. Dong didn't interrupt me. He interrupted the minister. I thought the minister was given a chance to answer. So if the Liberals are interfering with their own minister, I would let Mr. Rodriguez finish.
Again, that's not a point of order. Mr. Rodriguez, we'll turn to you.
Thank you.
No, I just want to thank my colleagues for their extremely hard work and the professional work they're doing, and all of you actually for the work you're doing on behalf of Canadians. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We'll turn to Mr. Polyev for the next 5 minutes.
Did the Prime Minister's cabinet director who recommended this program, Rick Theis, know that in March of 2020, the We organization had paid for the Prime Minister's wife to go on a trip to London? Yes or no?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to go back to Mr. Poilievre's question because he's picking documents here and there like that. The critical path he's referring to, that was after the cabinet decision, so I don't know why he wanted to go there.
Yeah, the question was, did Rick Theis know that the Prime Minister's wife had her expenses covered by the We organization to go to London? Yes or no?
No, not that I know of.
He didn't know?
Not that I know. No.
Okay, so she went with her expenses covered by the We organization to London, England in early March of 2020. 2 months later, the Prime Minister's office was approving a $500 million grant to the We organization. And you're saying Mr. Theis, who is Trudeau's top advisor on this, didn't know.
So what are you insinuating, Mr.
I asked a question. I'm asking a question.
I think those are serious attacks or insinuations
Did he know?
On people.
Did he know?
That
did he know?
Doing their best to have their.
Did Mr. Theis know?
Based on what I know, I don't know. I don't think so. But again,
sorry, you don't know. You don't think so. You've gone from no, you don't know, to you don't think so. Which is pick your favorite answer?
Pick one.
Okay.
The answer is no, Mr. Poilievre. You know it. I said it.
I have to say, I've never had that happen where the witness gives multiple contradictory answers and says you can pick your favorite one. It's like liberal principles. You don't like my principles, I've got others. Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on.
Your question right from the start, right?
We'll move on. Okay, so you're saying that Mr. Theis didn't know that his boss's wife had an all-expense-paid trip to London 2 months before his boss gave that same group that paid for her trip a $500 million grant. That's what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that you seem to be insinuating that Mr. Theis should be aware of all kinds of stuff.
Well, I'll tell you why he would know. Because it was in the news.
He would know.
It was actually in the news that his boss's wife had taken a trip with the We organization only 2 months before Mr. Theis was allegedly recommending Trudeau hand a $500 million to the same group. That's why he would know.
What does this have to do with his interaction with We? I'm told you that there was one interaction of 25 minutes. That's all. So why don't you want to?
I'll tell you what it has to do. Right? You ask me a question, I'll answer. I'll show you how to answer a question.
Try to do that.
If the Prime Minister's wife is getting all expense paid trips from a group, then he shouldn't be giving that same group a $500 million of our money. That's a conflict of interest. That's why. So once again, for clarification, this is something that was submitted to the Prime Minister's office. It was from the We organization, and it highlights that Sophie Gregoire and Margaret Trudeau were called celebrity ambassadors to the We organization. Are you telling me that Mr. Theis, who received the document in which this promotion was contained, did not know that the Prime Minister's wife and mother were being paid by the We organization? Yes or no?
No, he didn't know.
He didn't know. Okay.
No, he didn't know.
All right. Right. So he assumed that the trip for London was free. He assumed that their work as celebrity ambassadors was free. Right. Okay. So on what? Let me ask very quickly. The contract says here that the $500 million grant began being spent on May the 5th. On what date did Rick Theis talk to the We organization over the phone? On what date?
On May the 5th. Same day.
Well, what a coinkydink. Is that what it is? A coincidence that the same day the Prime Minister's advisor spoke to the We organization, they started spending money?
No. It's the same day.
It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. There you go. I agree with you on that. I agree with you. It's not a coincidence.
I think you should sometimes listen to the answers, Mr. Poilievre.
You gave me an answer.
No, you didn't. And you're trying to go around the simple fact that there was only one conversation. You're trying to put things on Mr. Tice.
So to be clear,
who's a remarkable staffer. That's there for the right reasons.
To be clear, you say the PMO had nothing to do with giving this money over. On May 5th, Rick Theis, top advisor to Trudeau, talks to the WE organization, and on May 5th, without even a contract being signed, the WE organization starts spending a $500 million government grant.
Poilievre,
big coincidence, right?
Mr. Poilievre, the agenda for the cabinet is set way before you were in cabinet. You know that. Don't say that it's not the case, right?
It's all a coincidence, right?
Mr.
Now,
Poilievre,
did Mr. Theis, the top advisor, you said earlier that Mr. Theis, top Trudeau advisor, spoke to the Prime Minister about the WE program. Did he talk about the money that the Trudeau family had received from the WE organization in that conversation?
No.
Did he?
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. Your time is up. We're going to turn now to Ms. Shanahan. Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you very much, Chair. And before I continue, I just want to say a word about our conduct here at this committee and our treatment of witnesses. We have seen this before in this committee, that witnesses are browbeaten, that they are interrupted frequently, and that aspersions are cast on their conduct and on their answers. This is unworthy of a parliamentary committee. We have seen this here and in other committees. It is badgering the witness. And
point of recognizing a point of order, Mr. Angus.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Rodriguez. I have not browbeat him or attacked him. I want Madame Shanahan to retract her comments. I think Mr. Rodriguez, I've treated him with respect.
I'm not sure that that's a point of order. It's a point of debate, obviously.
Mr. Rodriguez,
point of
defend me.
We'll turn back to Madame Shanahan.
And thank you, Chair, because indeed I did not mention the name of that member, and so he took it upon himself to think that it referred to himself. And what I am talking about is the general conduct here at this committee, this meeting, and other meetings. Donc, je veux continuer avec.
So I want to continue with the questions that we have for the Minister, who is here with us today to represent the government. First of all, I'm curious to hear Minister Rodriguez on the testimony that was given earlier concerning page 30. I believe it was page 30 of the book on parliamentary procedure. Concerning subordinates, the role of staffers and the ministers who are responsible for them. Mr. Rodriguez. Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for the question. And I think that this really is a fundamental point. This is a very clear principle, the principle of ministerial responsibility. And, you know, in the end, staff come to work every morning, they work hard. Sometimes they leave very well-paid jobs or other work that they do so that they can serve the country. And they're there to advise us. But the ministers make the final decisions. So it is the ministers who are accountable to Parliament, to committees, and so on. And again, ultimately to Canadians. So that principle is absolutely fundamental, Ms. Shanahan, and I'm glad that we were able to touch on that again. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to quote someone here. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, ministers are ultimately accountable and answerable to Parliament. Therefore, ministerial staff members will not appear when called before parliamentary committee. Instead, ministers will appear before a committee when required to account for staff members' actions. Virtually all departmental activity is carried out in the name of the minister, and ultimately that accountability lies with the minister. That was Mr. Poilievre in that committee, in your committee, your same committee, a couple of years ago. Same person, same committee.
Excellent. And I thank you for that. I believe that you weren't given the opportunity to respond to Mr. Poilievre's previous question. And so in the spirit of cooperation and collaboration, could you respond to that regarding the critical path?
Yes, I think it's very important because Mr. Poilievre has been, taking out one document here and from there from 5,000 pages. I don't even know what he's showing there. And so, and I think we have to be professional here and ask the questions in a professional way. So he should have said that critical path, the document he was referring to, that's something that happened after cabinet. And I understand from the question that he's trying to imply that those are things that happened before, but it's absolutely not the case. That was a critical path to get the things out of the door, but after it was adopted by cabinet. And the thing is, it was there to make sure that there was enough due diligence. The term due diligence here was the whole key of that document that Mr. Poilievre is referring to.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'll just continue in French. Mr. Rodriguez, in your experience, does it commonly happen that things that are not requested concerning a government program be sent? So is it inappropriate for the government to follow up on proposals like this? So it's absolutely not inappropriate, Madam Shanahan, especially during a pandemic where, we need to do things differently, think differently, make decisions a lot faster than usual, create programs from things almost from scratch. We need to be there for seniors, for workers, for families, for businesses, for people who've lost their jobs. That's what the government did. There's all sorts of interactions with organizations and unions and individuals and businesses. There are all sorts of new programs and ideas happening. But the important thing is that everything happened according to the official standards. Thank you.
Turn now to Monsieur Gourde for the next 5 minutes. Monsieur Gourde.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister Rodriguez, for being there. I'd like to know from you, in this whole saga, from the beginning, when the contracts were attributed, until the end, were you ever involved in the We Charity process at any step? No, never. Never. So did you speak to cabinet when the program was set up? Well, I can't tell you the discussions that happened within cabinet. Well, no, I mean, without giving any details, but you must have talked about the program existed. Look, I did raise things outside of cabinet. Of course, I can never refer to anything that happens in cabinet, as you know. But outside of cabinet, I did ask questions. For example, I asked a question about WE's ability to provide their service in French. That was really essential for me. I thought that they should be able to provide services in both official languages. And I was told that, yes, they would be able to do that. There were discussions about maybe... I asked a question in the House, about We Charity, and I was told that the information wasn't available. But it might have been a good idea to hire students because, Canadian businesses were hiring and they had to say no, they had to stop hiring because there wasn't enough money. They could have given more money to the employers who wanted to hire students. That could have been a good idea. Well, there are a lot of different things. We can always look back and say we could have done this or that. And I take your point, Mr. Gourde, but, the government did everything that they could to help Canadians in good faith, to help students. And if you're looking at this program today, it was part of a whole series of measures to double student grants, to provide a special benefit for students, because, students are really some of the people who suffered the most during the pandemic. Okay, no, I understand, Minister. With all due respect, you said earlier that you had heard recommendations from everyone, and the Conservatives had suggested that money be added to the student jobs program, and you had lots of time to do that. They were still distributing money even in August. And I asked this question around May, June of last year in the House. It's not that the Conservative ideas weren't good or that the Liberal ideas were better, you know. The government could have put money in the right spot to help students have an opportunity to work instead of staying home. You know, they easily could have had 100,000 more students working. You know, I have people in my riding who were ready to hire 15 students if they had had the money, but they didn't have enough funding. Well, you can always look back and say you should have done this or that, you know, maybe. But we were considering a whole range of options, and, you know, as a member of the government, I know, I'm well placed to know that a lot of the programs that we proposed were originally ideas of the Conservatives, or the NDP, or the Bloc. And for a long time, we put partisanship aside for the good of Canadians. Well, that's all well and good, but there's still a lack of money for those businesses. So there's still time for you to put something in the budget. You know, I'm just saying, it's an idea, you know? If you want to help students, you could increase funding to the summer jobs program for students. And that would really help them get some work experience. That would be really enriching, rather than just having them stay home. You know, we can't have students spending 2 whole summers staying home doing nothing, you know? Give these employers the opportunity to hire students. Give them the funding. And then they'll have this really amazing experience. Well, you're right that we should always be doing more for our students. They're the future. You know, I agree, but maybe you can tell your colleagues that, you know, there are good measures to help students in Bill C-14, and maybe you could encourage them to get that, help us get that bill passed. Anyway, I'm putting the idea out there. Well, you know, you're saying you weren't involved at all in the process, so I'm not sure why you're appearing here for 3 hours, appearing before the committee, if you can't provide us with any more information, any more if you can't shed any more light on this whole situation. Well, what I was saying was that I didn't help prepare the project, and that's normal, you know, it was a different minister who was responsible, but once again, the reason for my presence here today has to do with the principle of ministerial responsibility, which was defended by Conservatives, rightly so. And we also defend that principle, and I hope you do too. Well, we sent, you know, we used to send ministers who were able to answer the question. You don't seem to be very knowledgeable about the file. Well, you know, I've been answering your questions for 3 hours. No, only 2 or 3 minutes for my questions. I haven't been taking up 3 hours here. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see you back in the riding soon. Yes. Thank you.
Your time is up. We're going to turn to Ms. Latanzio now for the next round of questions. Ms. Latanzio.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
thank you, Mr. Chair. So, more questions for the Minister. I wanted to get a little bit more into some of the details of the testimony that was given by the Clerk of the Privy Council. It said that given the importance of the issue of taking action during the pandemic, that, like, he didn't know how the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance would not have been able to contribute to developing these policies, the CSSG and so on. So could you comment on that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Ms. Latanzio, it was the Clerk of the Privy Council who responded and said that, you know, given how vast and important the program was, how much money was involved, that yes, it would have been difficult for them not to be involved. So that is what the clerk told the committee. And Minister, I understood earlier, there was a question asked by my colleague, Mr. Sorbera, so I understood that out of the 5,000 pages of documents, there were some letters to Mr. Tice, and that there had been no follow-up. That's what I understood. So if that's the case, it seems clear to me that there wasn't any communication, any follow-up between we and Mr. Tice, correct? Well, you're right, Ms. Latancio. There was only that one conversation that I referred to on May 5th, which was a 25-minute conversation. And we, Charity, talked about their services and so on, but, they explained who they were, he asked a few questions, and then he directed them to diversity, inclusion, and youth. As you said, there were a number of emails written to Mr. Tice, and I think he only responded to one of them, sort of a courtesy reply, as, the kind that we often send ourselves. But other than that, he didn't follow up. So, Minister, those documents were indeed tabled. This is all part of the 5,000 pages that were issued to our colleagues. So it seems very clear to me that this individual had received some emails but didn't really follow up. And so, to me, this sort of concludes the debate. There's no question to me about the nature of the communication. I feel like people are asking the same questions over and over. What was the nature of the communication and so on. And it's always the same questions over and over. So it seems like, the goal is to badger witnesses. I'm not saying that you're being badgered, Minister, necessarily, but I think that might be what you were referring to when you were talking about some witnesses being intimidated. Now, is it fairly frequent in your experience that ideas or proposals that were not asked about a program would be sent to the government? I sort of answered this earlier. It's fairly frequent. If there are discussions with groups or businesses or members of the opposition, people submit ideas, particularly in a pandemic where, at the beginning of the crisis, we were thinking, man, how are we going to react to this? All of the members of parliament were saying, okay, how can I help my constituents? The government was saying, how can we set up new programs? And this led to really a great period, I would say, one of the nicest periods I've ever experienced as a minister, where we were able to work together, like with Mr. Julian, with Candice Bergen, with Mr. Terrien. We really set partisanship aside, and we came up with some really good collaborative projects. And in your opinion, Minister, do you think it's inappropriate for the government to follow up on proposals or ideas for programs? I mean, a program that is really, really big and would help Canadians a lot. Well, I think what's important, Ms. Latancio, is to follow up in a responsible, professional way that really respected all of the rules. And that's what the government did. To get back to your question, it's not uncommon to have proposals like this because Canadians, are overflowing with all kinds of good ideas. And when the government listens to them, it needs to be done in the right way.
Your time is up. I'm going to turn to Monsieur Fortin. Monsieur Fortin for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Ministre, je vous ai entendu encore.
Thank you. Minister, I think you answered a question from Mr. Barrett, I believe. He was asking if Rick Theis was aware that the Prime Minister's wife had an all-expenses-paid trip to London paid by We Charity, and you replied, not that I know. Well, as in previous situations, I mean, obviously, you're not Rick Theis. You don't know what he does or does not know. I understand that. And I think that all of the members of this committee understand it. And that's why we asked him to come. That's why, we didn't want to badger him. We wanted to ask him questions to say, okay, what was happening? What did he know? But if we can't get his testimony, if we can't compel him to appear, even when the House issues a directive to that effect, well, then, Minister, how are we supposed to know what Rick Tice knows or doesn't know? Well, by looking at various testimony. Mr. Fortin, you've been here from the beginning. No, but Minister, you just said, not that I know of. That's what you said. You know, I don't know, we need facts. These are things that you've said. No. When I was talking about facts, I was talking about Mr. Poilievre. But look, I'm not blaming you, Minister. Look, I understand. I understand the position you're in. You don't know what Rick Tice knows or doesn't know, but we need to know what he knows because there are witnesses who told us very concerning things, and we want to make sure that we're getting the right version of events. So how can we know if we can't compel his testimony? How can we know? Well, Mr. Fortin, I think that I answered you fairly clearly. I answered all of your questions. Look, but like, how do we get the version of events? How do we get to the truth here? What are we supposed to do? Well, through me, Mr. Fortin. Yeah, but you say you don't know. You say I don't know. Look, you know, Mr. Poilievre has 5,000 documents and he'll say, oh, what's in this one? No, the question is, did Rick Tice know that the Prime Minister's wife had a trip to London paid for? And you said, I don't know. So my question is, who are we supposed to ask this question to if Rick Tice can't appear and you don't know? I didn't say I don't know. Yes, you said not that I know. That's what you said, not that I know. That's right, not that I know. Well, if I can't ask Rick Tice, who can I ask?
Dan, your time is up, and we'll allow the minister to answer.
Votre humble serviteur devant vous, Monsieur Fortin.
Well, you can ask me, yeah, but you don't seem to have any answers.
Fortin, we're going to turn to Mr. Angus now for the next round of questions. That's 2.5 minutes, Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you know, it's great. You seem surprised when we mentioned 5,000 pages of documents. Well, we have to read them. So I'd like to ask you, how many times was Mr. Tice briefed on the Canada Summer Student Service Grant?
So, how many times he was briefed?
Yeah.
How many times he was briefed?
Prior to this going to cabinet?
It was. I can tell you that it was around the first time it was supposed to go to cabinet. I wasn't involved before that.
So you don't know. So maybe that phone conversation the first time he was briefed?
No, because that was a general conversation and he was very clear.
Well, actually, it wasn't a general conversation. See, Mr. Rodriguez, I really think you're downplaying and diminishing Mr. Tice's importance. He's the Director of Cabinet Affairs. So April 30th, he is briefed for an hour on the Canada Summer Student Grant. So he knows all about this. A briefing to the Director of Cabinet because it is going to Cabinet. And then on May 5th, he has a 25-minute meeting, which you say, well, I think I heard Ms. Latanzio, people have big ideas. God, the government loves talking to people with big ideas. Director of Cabinet doesn't talk with a bunch of people with big ideas. They're talking about $1 billion program that's about to be approved at Cabinet. And he gets briefed by Craig and Marc Keilburger, and they write to him later about the streamlining of the contribution agreement. So we have an issue here where the Prime Minister's Director of Cabinet Affairs that's about to bring this to Cabinet has an hour briefing on the grant and then has a meeting with Craig and Marc Keilburger. So what was it that they were trying to streamline? Because we saw a lot of problems with this program. Why did he tell them that they could streamline this?
I'm sorry, Mr. Angus, but there's one thing I have to correct here. It is his job to meet with people and stakeholders, and he does it all.
Oh, I know. I bet every charity phones and gets a call with Rick Tice for 25 minutes just before it goes to cabinet. And I'm because I know he's such a great human being. But I'm asking is about $1 billion deal. Don't you think it would have been reasonable that the Director of Cabinet got a full briefing? Yeah, I think so. Don't you think it was smart for the Director of Cabinet to have a 25 5-minute conversation to talk about what they needed to do, how they needed to get it out the door, and then lo and behold, the money starts flowing the day he has a conversation. Don't you think he was why don't you just say he was doing his job because $1 billion was on the table and was about to go to cabinet, so the Rick Tice's job was to defend the Prime Minister.
But Mr. Angus,
wouldn't that be a better framing, so we at least think that this wasn't just an incompetence signing off with a bunch of friends of the Prime Minister?
It wasn't the case, Mr. Angus. He did his job. He met with
it was just a group that was about to get $1 billion.
It was one of them.
Cabinet.
They asked. Actually, they requested for a meeting many times before he could find a time to meet with him, because he's meeting with everybody else.
Just before it went to cabinet for $1 billion, 900 million.
And again, Mr. Angus, the cabinet makes the decisions, right? Some Mr. Theis.
Well, I know, but don't you think the director of cabinet's going to have to do some what kind of operation are you running there, Pablo? He's just being a nice guy talking to all kinds of people. He wasn't talking to YMCA. He wasn't talking to Imagine Canada. He was talking to the Keilburger brothers.
Thank you, Mr. Angus.
$900 million.
We'll give the minister an opportunity to answer the question, then we're going to go over to Mr. Carey. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. He is talking to a lot of people. Charlie, with all due respect, I know that it is a fact, and PMO has to be open. The other thing is, if I may, Mr. Chair, everything has to be done super quickly, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, so we have to put programs in place, this and that. So if you think that in normal times, well, maybe normal times, but these are not normal times, Charlie. So,
well, $1 billion.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Your time is up, but we're going to turn to Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Angus just asked you a question about meetings, and he asked about a specific meeting, but I believe you said that they tried to get a bunch of meetings before that, but they didn't get them. Maybe if after this meeting, if you could give us those dates that they tried to get in touch with Mr. Tice. But in response to Mr. Gord, you said you were never involved in the we process, yet you're the minister that Mr. Trudeau has sent to committee today, and I'm sure that you have prepared extensively for today, but you may notice there's some frustration in our voices because there's so many contradictions in what the government's put out on this, and our job is to get to the truth for Canadians. So I just want to lay out the narrative that has been given by your government. Now, Mr. Rodriguez, on April the 18th, officials from the former finance minister, Bill Morneau, and other government officials suggested we as a potential third party for a student service grant program. Then on April 20th, Michelle Kovacek, Deputy Assistant Minister of Finance, said in an email to officials from the Privy Council office that the PMO was already weighing in on the we proposal. Yet according to the PMO's released timeline of events, there's no mention of the PMO until Sophia Marquez, which is the Director of Government Relations at we, emailed a staffer at the PMO and referred her to Rick Tice, Prime Minister's policy advisor. And on May 1st, Mr. Tice contacted Ms. Marquez, indicating interest in a meeting via phone, a call that takes place on the 5th of May with both Marc and Craig Keilburger, as well as Ms. Marquez. Before Finance Committee last year, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff testified that the 25-minute call was merely for a general discussion before Mr. Tice referred the Keilburgers and Ms. Marquez to the ESDC, yet the PMO summary says the only topic of the call had to do with Rick Tice's concern regarding diversity of placement for programs, which is an issue that takes no more than 5 minutes to resolve, leaving approximately 20 minutes unaccounted for. What exactly was in that conversation? What are we hiding here? What's the government hiding? To make matters worse, Mr. Rodriguez, in response to Craig's follow-up email, Mr. Tice said that they should be in touch soon, that there'd be no plausible reason for why Mr. Tice would think to be in contact with a stakeholder that hasn't even been approved for a relevant government contract. And that is, of course, unless your government had something to hide. Yet Craig Keilburger sent a follow-up email suggesting Mr. Tice and the PMO should help we streamline the contribution agreement. That was 3 days before the Prime Minister was even made aware of we's approval, according to the PMO's summary, and 17 days before Cabinet approved we as the third party administrating the Canada Student Service Grant Program. There's no reason why to talk of a contribution agreement should come up unless the call was more than a general discussion, Mr. Rodriguez. And it's also critical to note that on May 5th is the exact date that the contribution agreement, which was approved on June 23rd, applied retroactively, meaning that we was able to receive reimbursement expenses from the federal government before the Prime Minister even knew of WE's approval. So with your government's narrative laid out, the math just doesn't add up. We have a finance official saying the PMO is weighing in on WE's proposal 10 days before the PMO summary indicates any substantive discussion between we and PMO officials. A 25-minute phone call that was supposedly very general, but suspiciously took 20 minutes longer than needed. Craig Keilburger suggesting the PMO should help we streamline the contribution agreement, despite the PMO not even being aware of the WE's proposal until 3 days later. And Mr. Tice suggesting to Craig Keilburger that they should speak again soon, despite your government's claim that it's the ESDC alone handled the Canada Student Service Grant Program's crafting. So to top it all off, the contribution agreement signed between we and the government applied retroactively to May the 5th, long before we was supposedly given the go-ahead to implement the program. So Mr. Rodriguez, I can't even count how many holes are in this plot. And here you have today given no testimony that lays any rest to the unanswered questions evident in your government's narrative. There are only 4 people that can do that: Rick Theis, Ben Chin, Amitpal Singh, and the Prime Minister. Mr. Rodriguez, my question very simple. You are not one of those people. Which ones will be coming to testify before us on Wednesday? Could you please let us know? We need to find answers.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. It's nice to see you. It's been a while. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
Well, Mr. Carey is almost out of time, but you should take the remainder of that, and I will give you, as a chair's prerogative, a little bit of additional time to answer the questions that were asked.
Thank you, much appreciated. As I mentioned, Mr. Carey, there was no conversation, no discussion during that phone conversation about agreements, contract, money, or anything like that. And if I may, I would like to remind you that it's the public servants that recommended we, and they said that the only ones that could administer that program. And this is why when it went to cabinet the first time on May 8th, it was pulled back because we wanted more due diligence. The Prime Minister had many questions on a lot of things, and then we moved ahead, but it's definitely as it should be. I mean, the public servants were involved since the beginning, and they made that recommendation, and that's how it was. I mean, there's no new facts here. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Minister. We'll turn to Ms. May now. Ms. May for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm deeply grateful to have a 5-minute round. I'm trying to, and I'll start by saying that I think I'm the only member asking questions of the Minister who voted in favor of the motion that compels staffers to be present, but who also thinks it's appropriate for a minister to step forward and replace that staffer. But I want to put it on record that I think that the position taken by Mr. Poilievre in 2010 was incorrect. The position he takes today is correct. I think political staffers may in fact have essential information that committees may need, but on principles of ministerial responsibility and accountability, it's appropriate for minister to replace them. So my question to you, Mr. Rodriguez, is, and we've been very informal here, we've all been acknowledging friendships, so I'll say, Pablo, we also are old friends. I'm wondering, is it to your full understanding, as I see it now, that Mr. Rick Theis had one interaction with We Charity, Marc and Craig Keilburger and Sophia Marquez, and that the entirety of his direct communication with them was a 25-minute phone call on May 5th. Is that correct?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, if I may say, Elizabeth. And it's great to see you. It's been a while. I miss seeing you guys. It's difficult to be in our homes all the time. Yes, indeed, there was that was the only phone conversation. I made sure that I would ask Mr. Theis all those questions. So I asked Was that the only conversation? He said, absolutely. I asked for the content of the conversation. It's exactly what I explained to you. There was no conversation before that. There was no conversation after that. There was only, I think, an exchange of one email where when he said something like, oh, we'll be in touch again. And when I asked about that, it said that it was out of courtesy, something that we usually do, which is true.
Yeah. Okay, because for me, a lot of the questions I went back over my notes from when a number of key players testified to a different committee, to the Finance Committee. It was some months ago, but I was able to participate in those meetings as well. And we certainly, the public of Canada, anyone paying attention to this issue, knows that Rachel Warnick, as Assistant Deputy Minister for the key Department of Employment Services, ESDC, testified. The Prime Minister testified, and his chief aide, Katie Telford, testified. And I don't know that Mr. Tice's phone call on May 5th adds anything. And I say that because part of me regrets voting for a motion to compel staffers to come forward if they don't have anything important to contribute. And in the case of Mr. Tice, now that I realize we're looking at one phone call of 25 minutes on May 5th, I don't see how it can be germane, knowing that we know that decisions and conversations took place with Rachel Warnick, conversations took place to get the We Charity lined up way before a conversation May 5th. We know that the announcement was made April 22nd that there would be such a program. The Prime Minister made the announcement before any agency was lined up to do the work. They then backtracked and said, no, Prime Minister, you can't use the Canada Service Corps, it can't do the work. Then somehow We Charity's name got into the mix. Then we had a May 8th effort to key it off, and it was rejected till June 25th. So I'm in terms of this, to not to waste too much of the committee's time, and I apologize, but it seems to me that it's only appropriate to ask staffers to be compelled to appear to a committee if they have information that's relevant. And I don't see how Mr. Tice's 25-minute phone call May 5th can add anything substantial to what we already know, since the We Charity was already being keyed up to go to the key cabinet committee before that call. It was on the agenda for May 8th, and it got bounced back till June 25th for reasons that are already much in the public domain, including, by the way, in the public domain. So I don't know why everyone's dancing around this, but I'm sorry to all colleagues, just to point out, everybody knew that Sophie Gregoire-Trudeau had been in London with the We Charity. The only question was her way paid there. She got COVID attending the We Charity event in March. We all know this. So it's my question, I guess, my only question remaining is, will the government continue to oppose having staffers come forward if they have relevant additional information? I think, Mr. Rodriguez, you've demonstrated that the one thing you can tell us is that there was a 25-minute phone conversation May 5th and nothing more than that. If that's the sum total of it, I don't know that it was worth your time or the committee's time for you to bring that information forward. Do you have any other comments on what you may or may not have been told by Mr. Tice as to any pertinent involvement he had in this matter?
Thank you. It was extremely important for me, Elizabeth, to have that conversation with Mr. Tice. And today, when I had a little bit more information to ask, I did again to make sure that I was able to provide that information to the committee. And the total of time he spoke to them is exactly what you said. It's about 25 minutes, and it was mostly a general conversation. And that's what it is. Now, everybody knew this, and it's, I mean, honestly, I don't know why Mr. Tice's name was added to that motion. It's not up to me to decide or judge or whatever. I'm just asking the same way you are asking, because it was known that there was only a conversation of 25 minutes a long time ago. Why? Because we provided thousands of pages of documents.
Point of order.
Do you happen to know if...
Point of order. Recognizing a point of order, Mr. Angus.
Yes, just in that we are about 30 seconds away from the 3-hour mark, and we need full committee support to continue. I can't continue after 5 o'clock, so I'm just asking because we have 2 motions before us. Is that going to be picked up on Wednesday?
We certainly have time on. I suspect that we have time. I think that there would, if there's committee will to move forward on those motions, we certainly could do that. But I take your point that you're leaving, and I suspect that members would want to have all members present if the motions were to be debated. Yes. So I hear you, Ms. May. Your time is almost up, but I'll let you ask your final question and
no,
allow the minister to answer.
In deference to Charlie's time, I'll stop there.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I didn't want to interrupt. It was just if we ran out at 5 o'clock, certainly we have to get. I have to know where we're going to go next.
I do know that schedules are tight, and we have had a lengthy meeting here. So, Minister, I don't know if there was a question that hadn't been answered there. I'll give you the opportunity to answer, and then we will move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. No, as I said before, I agree with Ms. May's comments. I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for chairing this meeting so professionally. I much appreciate it. And to all of you colleagues from all parties, thank you for everything you're doing for our country. We may disagree on the way to get that. We all agree that we want to improve the life of Canadians, and that's why we're all here. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I'm speaking out of turn, but you had a difficult meeting, and you always do it with real professionalism and grace. So thank you.
It's a privilege to chair. Members, colleagues, we'll now move to adjourn. I look forward to seeing you again at the next meeting. Meeting adjourned.